I'll kill you if you dare leave this room. That was the last thing Celine heard before a gunshot ripped through the air in the penthouse. The city's most powerful billionaire was kneeling on his own marble floor, blood streaming down his perfect face, while the man holding the gun to his head wasn't an enemy, but the woman he'd loved the wrong way. This is the story of how love turned into imprisonment. Watch to the end, hit like, and comment the city you're watching in so I know how far this story has come. The porridge burned at exactly 11:47 p.m. Celine Vey stood in the industrial kitchen of the Blackridge Tower penthouse, watching copper-bottom pots bubble and blacken while rain hammered against floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel like she was floating 50 stories above a city that had stopped caring whether she lived or died. 4 months ago, she'd walked through those elevator doors carrying nothing but a single suitcase and a resume that looked impressive on paper but meant absolutely nothing to a man like Lucien Draven. He hadn't hired her for credentials. He'd hired her because she knew how to disappear into backgrounds, how to exist without taking up space, how to be useful without ever being seen. Tonight, she was done disappearing. The smoke alarm should have gone off by now, but Lucien had the entire system disabled weeks ago because the sound disrupted his morning calls to Tokyo. Everything in this glass fortress bent to his will: the temperature, the lighting, the people. Celine had watched employees get fired for arriving 30 seconds late, had seen business partners destroyed with a single phone call, had witnessed him dismantle a competitor's entire company over lunch without ever raising his voice above a conversational murmur. She stirred the ruined porridge one last time and turned off the burner. Footsteps echoed across imported Italian marble. Lucien appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. His dark hair styled with that calculated precision that made him look like he'd stepped out of an architecture magazine instead of being an actual human being who breathed and bled and supposedly felt things. He glanced at the ruined pot, then at her face, and his expression didn't change at all. "Make another batch," he said. Not a request. Never a request. Celine set down the wooden spoon carefully on the granite counter. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them still. No. The word dropped into the space between them like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Lucien's eyes narrowed, just slightly, just enough that someone who'd spent 4 months studying every micro-expression on that controlled face would notice. "Excuse me?" I said no. Her voice came out steadier than she expected, stronger. "I'm not making another batch. I'm not making anything else tonight. I'm tired, I'm underpaid, and I'm done pretending that working for you is anything other than slowly erasing myself one day at a time." Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Somewhere in the building below, someone was probably closing a deal worth millions. Someone was probably celebrating a promotion. Someone was probably falling in love in one of those expensive bars with mood lighting designed to make everyone look attractive and interesting. But up here, in this temperature-controlled paradise that felt more like a mausoleum than a home, Celine watched Lucien Draven experience something he clearly hadn't felt in years. Surprise. He took one step into the kitchen. "You're upset about the porridge." "I'm upset about everything." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Do you even know my favorite color? My birthday? Anything about me that isn't printed on an employment file?" Lucien's jaw tightened. "This is a professional relationship. I don't need to know." "You don't need to know anything about the people who keep your life running smoothly while you make billions moving numbers around on spreadsheets." Celine grabbed the copper pot and dumped the burned mess directly into the sink. "Got it. Crystal clear. I'm furniture. Useful furniture that cooks and cleans and organizes your calendar and never, ever asks for anything in return except a paycheck that barely covers rent in a city you own half of. If you're dissatisfied with your compensation, this isn't about money." Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. "This is about the fact that I've worked for you for 4 months, and you've never once looked at me like I'm an actual person instead of a very efficient appliance." Lucien stared at her, actually stared. His hand came up like he was going to run it through his hair, a gesture she'd never seen him make, something that might indicate actual emotion happening beneath that perfect exterior. But then he stopped himself. Control reasserted itself. The mask slammed back down. "If you're unhappy here," he said quietly, dangerously, "the door is available." Celine felt something inside her chest that had been wound tight for months suddenly snap. "You know what? Fine. I'll use it." She walked past him, shoulder barely brushing his suit jacket, and headed for the small bedroom off the kitchen where she'd been staying. Her room. Except it wasn't really her room, was it? It was his space that he allowed her to occupy. His furniture, his sheets, his life. Behind her, she heard him move. Celine. She didn't stop. Yanked open dresser drawers and started throwing clothes into her suitcase without bothering to fold anything. 4 months of her life compressed back into cheap fabric and fake leather. 4 months of swallowing her pride, her voice, her entire sense of self for a job that was supposed to be temporary, but had somehow swallowed her whole. Celine. Closer now. Right behind her. Don't! She spun around and he was standing in the doorway of her room, taking up all the space, making it impossible to breathe. Don't do that thing where you use my name like it means something to you. It doesn't. I don't. I'm just another employee you'll replace by morning. His face did something complicated, something that might have been pain if he was capable of feeling it. You think this is easy for me? I think nothing is difficult for you. She shoved more clothes into the suitcase. I think you've built a perfect little kingdom where everything obeys and nothing challenges you, and you get to pretend that control equals happiness. You don't know anything about my life, because you've never told me anything. The suitcase was full, but she kept grabbing things anyway. Her toothbrush, the cheap paperback she'd been reading, the small ceramic mug she'd bought at a street market because it reminded her of home before she'd come here and forgotten what home felt like. 4 months of making your coffee exactly how you like it, organizing your impossible schedule, keeping your entire existence running smoothly, and you never asked me a single personal question. Not one. Lucienne took 1 step into the room. I knew if I started asking questions, I wouldn't be able to stop. The words hit her like cold water. Celine stopped moving, turned, looked at him standing there in his expensive suit with his careful hair and his controlled expression that was starting to crack around the edges. What? You think I don't know your favorite color? His voice had gone rough, raw, nothing like the smooth corporate weapon she'd heard for months. It's green, forest green. You wear it twice a week even though you only own 3 shirts that color, and you rotate them carefully so I won't notice your repeating outfits. Your birthday is August 14th. You refused to tell me, but I saw it on your employment paperwork, and I've had your gift sitting in my office for 2 weeks trying to figure out how to give it to you without making things complicated. She couldn't breathe. You hum when you cook, he continued, taking another step closer. Always the same song. Some old jazz standard your mother used to play. You touch your left earring when you're lying about being fine. You organize my files by color, even though I told you alphabetical was sufficient because you said color makes more sense, and you were right. You take your coffee with too much sugar and not enough cream, and you always drink it standing by the window watching the sunrise like you're trying to remind yourself that beautiful things still exist. Bert's Satie. Celine's hands had gone numb. You pay attention. I pay attention to everything. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see his chest rising and falling too fast, see the way his carefully controlled facade was disintegrating in real time. That's the problem. I pay attention to you constantly, and I don't know what to do with that information except keep it locked away where it can't destroy the professional boundaries that are the only thing keeping me from it. He stopped, closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something desperate had leaked through. From what? Celine whispered. From ruining everything by wanting something I have no business wanting. The rain kept falling. The city kept glowing. Somewhere in the building, people were living normal lives with normal problems and normal relationships that didn't feel like standing on the edge of a 50-story drop. Celine should have grabbed her suitcase and walked out, should have protected herself from whatever this was building between them in the charged air of her small room. Should have remembered that powerful men didn't actually care about their employees, that this was manipulation disguised as vulnerability, that she was about to make a mistake she couldn't take back. Instead, she took 1 step forward and watched his entire body go tense. Say it, she demanded. Whatever you're not saying, be honest for once in your life. Lucian looked at her like she was the most dangerous thing he'd ever encountered, like she was a weapon, like she was a grenade, like she was the only thing in his perfect controlled empire that he couldn't predict or manage or own. I don't want you to leave, he said finally. I want you to stay here and keep humming in my kitchen and organizing my files wrong and making porridge that sometimes burns because you're thinking about something else. I want to know everything about you. What keeps you awake at night, what you dream about, what you want from a life that doesn't involve working for someone like me. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. You're my employer. I know. This would be a disaster. I know. You don't know how to be with someone without trying to control them. His hands curled into fists at his sides. I know. Celine reached up and touched the side of his face. His skin was warm under her palm. Human. Real. He closed his eyes like her touch was painful and perfect at the same time. Then learn, she whispered. He kissed her like a man who'd been holding himself back for months and finally broke. Desperate and careful at the same time, one hand cupping the back of her neck while the other pressed against her lower back, pulling her closer. She tasted coffee and mint and something darker underneath. The flavor of restraint finally shattered. The suitcase fell off the bed. Neither of them noticed. The sun came up over the city while Celine lay in Lucian's bed watching shadows paint patterns across ceiling that cost more per square foot than most people's entire apartments. His penthouse bedroom was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold. Everything black and white and gray like color was a weakness he couldn't afford. The sheets were Egyptian cotton with a thread count that felt like sleeping on clouds. Except clouds didn't usually come with the weight of catastrophic professional mistakes. Lucien was already awake. She could tell by the way his breathing had changed from deep and steady to carefully controlled. His arm was still around her waist, his chest pressed against her back, but she could feel him thinking, planning, probably already regretting everything. Stop, she said quietly. Stop what? Whatever you're doing in your head right now, the calculations, the risk assessment, the exit strategy. His arm tightened slightly. I don't have an exit strategy. Everyone has an exit strategy, especially people like you. People like me. She rolled over to face him. His hair was messy for the first time since she'd met him, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger. More human, definitely more dangerous to her ability to think clearly. People who treat relationships like mergers, who protect themselves by keeping everyone at arm's length. Lucien traced one finger down the side of her face. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're terrified. I am terrified. No hesitation. He said it like a confession, like truth was a weapon he'd finally decided to use. I'm terrified that I've wanted this for months, and now that I have it, I'm going to destroy it by being exactly who you think I am. Celine caught his hand and pressed it flat against her chest where her heart was still beating too fast. Then don't be that person. It's not that simple. It never is. His phone started ringing, then again, then 5 more times in rapid succession, the sound of his empire demanding attention. Lucien glanced at the nightstand where the device was lighting up with notifications, then back at her face, and she watched him make a choice in real time. He silenced the phone and pulled her closer. Tell me something true, he said against her hair. Something you've never told anyone. Celine closed her eyes. I came to the city to disappear. After my parents died, I didn't want to exist anymore. Not in a dangerous way, just I wanted to be invisible. Working for you felt perfect because you didn't see me anyway. I could hide in plain sight. She felt his chest rise and fall, felt his heart beating against hers through skin and bone and all the fragile space between them. I'm looking now, he whispered. I'm seeing you now. I know, that's what scares me. The next 3 weeks rewrote everything Celine thought she understood about Lucien Draven. He took her to a street food vendor at 2 in the morning because she mentioned missing the taste of cheap dumplings from her college years. They sat on plastic stools under fluorescent lights while rain soaked the empty streets around them, and he looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in his $50 million penthouse. He asked her questions, listened to answers, laughed at a story about her disastrous attempt to learn guitar in her 20s, actually laughed, the sound rusty like he'd forgotten how. He let her reorganize his entire apartment because she said the empty minimalism made her feel like she was living in a hospital. They argued about throw pillows, about whether plants were worth the effort, about art that wasn't just expensive black and white photography. She won most of the arguments. He pretended to be annoyed and then bought everything she wanted anyway. He cooked with her. Badly. Burned 3 pans and somehow managed to catch a kitchen towel on fire. Stood behind her while she showed him how to properly dice an onion, his hands covering hers, his breath warm against her neck, while he murmured that he was paying attention, but his version of paying attention had nothing to do with vegetables. They stayed up until dawn talking about childhoods and mistakes, and the specific kind of loneliness that came from having everything except the one thing that mattered. He told her about building his empire from nothing, about the father who said he'd never amount to anything, about the ex-fiancée who'd wanted his money but recoiled from everything underneath, about the moment he'd realized control was easier than vulnerability. Celine told him about losing her parents in a car accident, about the inheritance that was supposed to help but just made her feel guilty for existing, about relationships that had failed because she kept choosing men who needed fixing instead of partners who saw her clearly. "Is that what I am?" Lucien asked one night while they lay tangled in sheets that no longer felt cold. "Something you're trying to fix?" "No." She traced patterns on his chest. "You're something I'm choosing to trust, even though every logical part of my brain says this is a disaster waiting to happen." He caught her hand and brought it to his mouth. "Your brain is right. I know. I'm going to hurt you. Probably. I don't know how to be in a relationship without trying to control it. Then I'll tell you when you're doing it." She looked up at him. "And you'll listen. That's the deal. Honesty, communication, equal footing even though you're a billionaire and I'm your employee, which is still deeply weird, and probably breaks 17 HR policies. You're not my employee anymore." He'd said it casually 3 days after they'd first slept together. Transferred her to a different division with a massive raise and a title that actually meant something. Made sure everyone knew she was off limits for office politics. Protected her in the only way he knew how. It should have felt romantic. Mostly, it just made her nervous. Because Lucien Draven didn't know how to love without trying to own. And Celine was starting to realize that protected could become caged faster than she'd ever imagined. The cracks started appearing in week 4. Small things at first. He asked where she was going when she left the apartment. Who she was meeting, how long she'd be gone. Framed every question like casual interest instead of interrogation. Celine told herself it was normal curiosity. That people in relationships checked in with each other. That she was being oversensitive. Then she found out he'd assigned her a security detail. "It's for your safety," Lucien said when she confronted him in his home office at midnight. "I have enemies. People who would use you to get to me. So you had me followed without telling me." "It's not following. It's protection. It's surveillance." Celine wrapped her arms around herself. "How long have they been watching me?" His silence was its own answer. "Since we started this?" Her voice went cold. "Since before?" "Lucien, tell me you haven't had people watching me since I started working for you." "I needed to know you were safe. You needed to know where I was, what I was doing, who I was talking to." She backed toward the door. "That's not protection. That's possession." He stood up from his desk. "You don't understand the kind of world I live in, the threats that exist. Then explain it to me instead of treating me like a piece of property that needs guarding. I'm trying to keep you alive. By taking away my freedom?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you realize how insane that sounds? You can't control me into staying safe, Lucien. That's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works." He moved around the desk, desperation bleeding through his careful control. "Tell me how to love you without being terrified that someone will use you against me. That something will happen because I wasn't careful enough, because I didn't protect you well enough." Celine's anger cracked, just slightly, just enough to see the fear underneath his need for control. "You trust me." "I do trust you." "No, you trust your security team. You trust your money and your power and your ability to monitor every variable. You don't trust me to take care of myself. You don't trust that I'm strong enough to exist in your world without being managed." He reached for her and she stepped back. "Celine, I need space. Tonight. I need to sleep somewhere else and think about whether this is actually working or if we're both just pretending." She watched his face go carefully blank, watched him retreat behind walls she'd thought they'd broken down. "You're leaving." I'm taking a night away from the penthouse. That's not leaving. That's establishing a boundary. Fine. The word came out clipped, cold. I'll have the car take you wherever you want to go. I'll take the subway. The hell you will. It's 1 a.m, and I'm an adult who's been taking care of herself long before I met you. Celine grabbed her bag from the couch. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't even let me leave without trying to control how I do it. She walked out before he could respond. Made it to the elevator before her hands started shaking. Rode down 50 floors while her reflection stared back from polished metal walls and whispered that she'd just made a massive mistake. Her phone started ringing before she hit the lobby. Lucienne. She silenced it. He called 4 more times by the time she reached the street. She turned off her phone entirely and disappeared into the subway station. What Celine didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that security footage would later show a man following her onto the train, watching her exit at the stop near her old apartment, trailing her through empty streets while the city slept. What she didn't know was that the man's name was Adrian Cross, that he worked for Magnus Rain, that he'd been watching her for weeks waiting for exactly this moment when she was vulnerable and alone. What she didn't know was that by the time she reached her apartment door, Lucien was already tearing apart his security feed trying to find her, that he'd called 17 times, that his carefully controlled empire was unraveling because the one person who mattered had walked out and he had no idea how to fix it without making everything worse. What she didn't know was that Adrian Cross was about to knock on her door with a smile designed to seem trustworthy, with a story about being a concerned neighbor, with the first move in a game that would destroy everything she and Lucien had built. She opened the door, and that's when everything changed. Adrian Cross had the kind of face that made people trust him immediately. Warm brown eyes, an easy smile that reached all the way up to the crinkles at the corners, the slightly rumpled look of someone who worked hard but didn't take themselves too seriously. When he knocked on Celine's apartment door at 1:30 in the morning, he looked genuinely concerned. "I'm so sorry to bother you this late," he said through the cracked door. "I just moved into 4C down the hall, and I think there's a water leak coming from your unit. My ceiling is dripping pretty badly." Celine stood there in her old sweatpants and t-shirt, exhausted from the fight with Lucien, trying to process whether this was real or just another problem in a night that had already gone completely sideways. "A leak? I haven't run any water since I got home. Maybe a pipe issue?" He gestured vaguely upward. "I don't know much about plumbing, but it's getting worse. Would you mind taking a look? I'd call the super, but he never answers after midnight." Every instinct told her to say no, to close the door and deadbolt it and call building maintenance herself in the morning. But she was tired and raw, and this guy seemed harmless enough. Besides, if there really was a leak, it needed to be dealt with before it caused serious damage. "Yeah, okay. Let me grab my keys." She followed him down the hallway to apartment 4C. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, flicking on lights to reveal a space that looked recently moved into. Boxes still stacked against walls, furniture arranged but nothing unpacked yet. And there, in the corner of the living room ceiling, a dark water stain was spreading across the plaster with droplets falling steadily into a strategically placed bucket. "See?" Adrian pointed up. "Started about an hour ago. I tried to figure out where your pipes run, but honestly, I have no idea how this building is laid out." Celine walked underneath the stain, studying the pattern. "This looks like it's coming from the main line, not my apartment. Your unit is directly under the building's water system access point. You're going to need to call the super even if he's annoyed about it." "Damn, I was afraid of that." Adrian ran a hand through his dark hair. "Can I offer you some tea while we wait for him to call back? I know it's late, but I feel terrible dragging you down here for nothing." She should have said no. Should have gone back to her apartment and locked the door, and maybe finally turned her phone back on to deal with whatever nuclear fallout was waiting from Lucien. Instead, she heard herself say, "Sure, 1 cup." That was the moment, the hinge point, the instant where everything that came after became inevitable. Adrian smiled and moved toward the kitchen. "I'm Adrian, by the way. Adrian Cross, architect. Just relocated here from Seattle for a project." "Celine." She didn't offer her last name. Didn't mention Lucien or Blackridge Tower or anything that might identify her as connected to one of the most powerful men in the city. Old instincts kicking in. The part of her that still remembered how to be invisible. He filled a kettle and set it on the stove. So what do you do, Celine? I work in management. Vague enough to be meaningless. You said you're an architect? What kind of project brought you here? Mixed-use development down in the financial district, trying to redesign some of the older buildings to be more environmentally sustainable without destroying their historical character. He pulled 2 mugs from a box. It's challenging but interesting work. Better than the tech campuses I was designing in Seattle. Those all started looking the same after a while. They talked about architecture and city planning and the way certain neighborhoods were being gentrified into unrecognizable versions of themselves. Adrian was easy to talk to, thoughtful. He asked questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. By the time Celine finished her tea, she'd almost forgotten about the fight with Lucien. Almost forgotten about surveillance and control and the feeling of being loved like a possession instead of a person. I should get back, she said finally, setting down the empty mug. Let me know if you need help dealing with the super. He's difficult, but if you mention legal liability, he usually moves faster. Thanks for the tip. Adrian walked her to the door. And thanks for coming down to look at the leak, even if there wasn't much you could do about it. No problem. Welcome to the building. She went back to her apartment and deadbolted the door and stood in the dark living room of a space that had once felt like sanctuary but now just felt empty. Her phone was still off. Lucien was probably losing his mind. Part of her felt guilty. Most of her felt exhausted. She didn't know that Adrian Cross had watched her walk back down the hallway with an expression that had nothing warm or trustworthy about it. Didn't know that he'd pulled out a second phone, not the one he'd shown her, but a different device entirely, and typed out a message that read, "Contact established. She trusts easily. Move to phase 2. Didn't know that the water leak had been manufactured, that Adrian had deliberately damaged the pipe himself to create a reason to knock on her door, that everything from his smile to his story to his apparent interest in sustainable architecture had been carefully constructed to make her feel safe. She turned on her phone. 37 missed calls from Lucien. 15 voicemails, 23 text messages that started calm and professional and deteriorated into something that looked like panic. The most recent one read, "Please just tell me you're safe. I don't care if you're angry. I don't care if you never want to see me again. Just tell me you're alive." Celine sat down on her second-hand couch and typed back, "I'm fine. I'm at my old apartment. I just needed space." The response came back in under 10 seconds. Thank God. Then nothing. She stared at the screen, waiting for him to demand she come back, to send the car, to try to control how and when and where she returned to him. But he didn't. He just went silent. And somehow that was worse. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Lay in her old bed, staring at ceiling cracks she'd memorized during other insomniac nights, and wondered if she'd just destroyed something good because she was too scared to trust it. Wondered if Lucien's need for control was really about possession or if it was about terror. Wondered if she was strong enough to love someone who didn't know how to be vulnerable without also being destructive. The sun came up. She made coffee. Her phone rang. Not Lucien. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then remembered she'd been job hunting before everything with Lucien had happened, back when working for him was supposed to be temporary. Maybe it was a callback. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was anything other than what it actually was. Hello? Celine Vey? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Yes? This is Jessica Rourke from Blackridge Security. I need you to listen very carefully and not hang up. Her stomach dropped. What's wrong? Is Lucien? Mr. Draven is fine, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Are you currently at your residence? Yes. What kind of situation? The man who introduced himself as Adrian Cross in apartment 4C is not who he claims to be. His real name is Marcus Webb, and he works for Magnus Rain. Do you know that name? Celine's hand went numb around the phone. No, should I? Magnus Rain owns Obsidian Capital. He's been attempting to acquire or destroy Blackridge Industries for the past 3 years. Mr. Webb was placed in your building 2 weeks ago, specifically to make contact with you. The room tilted. That's impossible. He just moved in. The water leak was manufactured. Ms. Vey, I need you to stay calm and stay exactly where you are. We're sending a team to extract you now. Do not open your door for anyone except someone who provides the code phrase Nightingale Protocol. Do you understand? This is insane. You're telling me I'm being targeted by some corporate enemy I've never even heard of? You're being targeted because of your relationship with Lucian Dreyevin. Magnus Rain uses personal leverage to destroy his competitors. He did his research. He knows about you and Mr. Draven. He knows that Mr. Draven is vulnerable where you're concerned. The word vulnerable hit like a slap, because that's what she'd made him. That's what happens when someone like Lucien finally lets down walls that were built for good reasons. How long? Celine's voice came out hoarse. How long has he been watching me? A pause. Long enough to be its own answer. We're not certain, at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. And Lucien knew about this? Another pause. Mr. Draven became aware of the potential threat 8 days ago. He increased your security detail at that time. 8 days ago. Right around when he'd started asking more questions. When the surveillance she'd thought was controlling possessiveness had actually been defensive paranoia. Why didn't he tell me? You would have to ask him that yourself. Our team will arrive in approximately 6 minutes. Please pack a bag with essentials and be ready to leave immediately. The line went dead. Celine sat frozen on her couch holding a phone that suddenly felt like evidence of how little she actually understood about Lucian's world. She'd thought his need for control was about ego, about power, about some fundamental inability to see her as an equal. She'd been wrong. Or maybe she'd been right and wrong at the same time. Maybe his surveillance was both possessive and protective. Maybe he was both controlling and terrified. Maybe people were more complicated than the clean narrative she wanted to put them in. She grabbed her bag and started throwing things into it. Clothes, toiletries, the paperback book that no longer mattered. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely zip the damn thing closed. A knock on the door made her freeze. Nightingale Protocol, a voice said from the hallway. Male. Deep. Calm in that way that suggested military training. She opened the door to find 2 men in dark suits who looked exactly like what private security was supposed to look like. One of them had a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. The other had the kind of build that suggested he could bench press a small car. Ms. Vey, Scarface said, I'm Agent Torres. This is Agent Kim. We need to move now. Where are we going? Back to Blackridge Tower. Mr. Draven is waiting. Of course he was. Probably in his office, or his penthouse, or wherever billionaires waited when their worst fears came true, and the woman they loved became a target because of them. She followed the 2 agents down the hallway. They moved like soldiers, constantly scanning. Hands positioned near concealed weapons, she suddenly realized they were definitely carrying. When they passed apartment 4C, Torres put a hand on her shoulder and moved her to the far side of the corridor. The door was open. Inside, she could see more security personnel going through Adrian's, Marcus Webb's, carefully constructed fake life. Boxes being emptied, fake architectural documents being photographed, an entire manufactured identity being dismantled in real time. How did you find out? Celine asked as they reached the elevator. We've been monitoring Rain's operations for months, Kim said. When Webb appeared in your building under a false identity, it triggered alerts. We've been surveilling him since then, waiting to see what his orders were. And his orders were to get close to me. Yes. The elevator descended through her building, carrying her away from the fragile independence she'd tried to reclaim. Away from the illusion that she could exist in Lucien's orbit without being consumed by it. Away from any pretense that walking away would solve anything. Because now she understood. Lucien's surveillance hadn't been about controlling her. It had been about keeping her alive in a world where she'd become a weakness that his enemies could exploit. The car waiting outside was armored, bulletproof glass, reinforced doors, the kind of vehicle that made it very clear exactly how dangerous Lucian's life actually was, underneath the expensive suits and penthouse views. They drove through morning traffic while Celine sat in the back seat trying to process everything. Adrian Cross didn't exist. The friendly architect who'd seemed so genuine had been a corporate weapon aimed directly at her. And Lucian had known, had tried to protect her without telling her the truth, had chosen surveillance over honesty because he was terrified and didn't know any other way. She'd called him controlling, called him possessive, walked out because she thought he saw her as property. She'd been so focused on feeling trapped that she hadn't noticed the actual trap being built around her. The car pulled into Blackridge Tower's underground garage. More security, reinforced gates, checkpoints that required biometric scans to pass. They took her up a private elevator that required a keycard and a retinal scan and probably a blood sacrifice for all she knew. The doors opened directly into Lucian's penthouse. He was standing by the window wall looking out over the city with his hands shoved in his pockets and his shoulders tight with tension. Still wearing the same clothes from last night, hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. When he heard the elevator, he turned around and the expression on his face made her chest hurt. Relief, fear, guilt, anger, everything crashing together in someone who'd spent a lifetime keeping emotions locked down tight. "Thank you, Torres," he said without looking away from Celine. "That will be all." The security team disappeared back into the elevator. The doors closed. They were alone in the glass fortress that had somehow become the only safe place left. "You knew," Celine said. Not a question. "Yes." "For over a week." "Yes." "And you didn't tell me." Lucien crossed the space between them in 3 strides. Stopped just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear he was trying to bury under control that kept slipping. "If I told you, you would have either thought I was being paranoid or you would have been terrified. Neither option kept you safe. So you just increased my security detail and hoped I wouldn't notice? I made sure you were protected while my team investigated whether the threat was real." His voice was rough, raw. "I made sure that if Magnus Rain tried to use you against me, he would fail. And you're here now. You're safe. That's all that matters." "That's not all that matters." She threw her bag onto his pristine white couch. "You don't get to make decisions about my life without telling me what's happening. You don't get to protect me by lying to me." "I didn't lie." "You omitted, which is the same thing." "It's not." He took another step closer. "Lying would have been telling you everything was fine when it wasn't. I simply handled the threat without involving you in something that would have terrified you unnecessarily." "That's not your decision to make. It is when the threat exists because of me." His control finally cracked. "You're in danger because you're with me. Because I was selfish enough to want you even knowing that everyone in my life eventually becomes a target. Because I couldn't stay away from you even though staying away would have kept you safe." Celine stared at him. "So what are you saying? That we shouldn't be together?" "I'm saying I don't know how to be with you without putting you at risk. I'm saying that every instinct I have tells me to lock you in this tower and surround you with security and never let you out of my sight because that's the only way I know how to keep you alive. That's not living. That's being in prison." "I know." He looked broken, actually broken. "I know. And I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to love you without being terrified, without trying to control every variable, without turning into exactly the kind of person you accused me of being." She wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the righteous fury that had driven her out of the penthouse last night. But standing here looking at someone who was clearly falling apart despite every attempt to hold himself together, she couldn't find it. "Lucien?" She reached up and cupped his face with both hands. "Look at me." He did. Those dark eyes that were usually so controlled now showing everything he usually kept buried. "I need you to understand something," she said quietly. "I can't be with someone who hides things from me because he thinks he knows what's best. I can't be with someone who protects me by taking away my choices. That's not partnership. That's control dressed up as love." "I know. But I also understand now that your world is dangerous in ways I didn't fully grasp, that there are actual threats, that your paranoia isn't just paranoia." He closed his eyes. "So what do? We figure it out together. You tell me the truth even when it's scary. You let me make my own decisions about my own safety even when you disagree. And I try to understand that your need for control comes from terror instead of ego. I don't know if I can do that." "Then we're done." She dropped her hands. "Because I won't live in a cage no matter how much you love me. And you have to decide if keeping me alive in a way that makes me hate you is really worth it." The silence stretched between them. Outside, the city went about its business. People were making coffee, going to work, living normal lives that didn't involve corporate espionage and manufactured identities and private security teams. "I'll try," Lucien said finally. "I'll try to trust you. To tell you the truth. To let you make your own choices even when everything in me wants to protect you by controlling you." That's all I'm asking. He pulled her into his arms, and she let him. Let herself sink into the embrace of someone who was fundamentally broken in ways that might never be fully fixed, but was at least willing to try. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Magnus, about the surveillance, about any of it. I'm sorry I walked out without listening. Don't apologize for that. You were right. I was treating you like property. You were also trying to keep me alive. Both things can be true." She pulled back enough to look at him. "So what happens now? Magnus Rain knows his guy got burned. What's his next move?" Lucian's expression went hard. "That's what we need to figure out. Marcus Webb was just surveillance. The real play is still coming." "What does he want? Your company?" "He wants to destroy me. The company is just the method." Lucien walked over to his desk and pulled out a folder. "Magnus and I used to be partners. 10 years ago. We started Blackridge together." "I didn't know that." "Most people don't. We kept it quiet even then." He opened the folder and spread out documents. "We had different philosophies about how to run the company. I wanted sustainable growth. He wanted to burn through anything and anyone that got in the way of profit. We fought about it constantly. Eventually, I bought him out." Celine looked at the papers. Contracts. Financial documents. Photos of a younger Lucien standing next to a man who had the same predatory look that Adrian Cross, Marcus Webb, had briefly shown. "He's been planning revenge for 10 years? He's been planning to take back what he thinks I stole from him. And he's patient, methodical. He'll have spent years looking for weaknesses in my empire." "And he found one." She met Lucien's eyes. "Me?" "Yes. So what's the play? He uses me to blackmail you, kidnaps me for ransom, kills me to make you suffer." "I don't know yet. That's what makes him dangerous. Magnus doesn't follow predictable patterns." Lucien. Ian closed the folder. "But now that we know Webb was compromised, he'll have to accelerate whatever timeline he was working on. He won't wait to establish another asset." "How do you know?" "Because that's what I would do." They stood there in the morning light of a penthouse that suddenly felt less like a fortress and more like a trap. Celine tried to process how quickly her life had shifted from arguing about surveillance to being an actual target in some corporate war she didn't fully understand. "I need to see the surveillance reports," she said. "Everything your team has on Magnus, on Webb, on whatever threat assessment you've been running." Lucien started to shake his head. "Celine, no. You don't get to protect me by keeping me in the dark anymore. If I'm involved in this, I need to know everything. That was the deal." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him fighting every instinct to shield her from information that might scare her, fighting the need to control by limiting what she knew. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll have everything sent up." "Thank you. But you stay in the tower, at least until we know what Magnus's next move is." "Lucien, that's not negotiable." His voice had gone hard. "You can have all the information. You can make your own decisions. But you're not leaving this building until I know it's safe. If that's too controlling for you, then I don't know how to make this work." Celine wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the boundaries he was trying to impose. But she also wasn't stupid. Someone had planted a fake neighbor in her building, had manufactured a water leak to make contact with her, had spent weeks watching and planning and waiting for an opportunity to exploit. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not staying locked in this penthouse like a princess in a tower. I go where I want in the building. I work. I live. You don't get to turn me into a prisoner just because there's a threat." "Agreed. And you tell me everything. No more secrets." "Everything," he promised. The folder arrived an hour later via Lucien's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria, who looked like she could kill someone with a stapler if necessary. It was thick, detailed, full of surveillance photos and financial documents and psychological profiles that made Magnus Rain look like something out of a thriller novel instead of a real person. Celine spread everything out on the dining table and started reading. Lucien sat across from her doing actual work on his laptop, but she could feel him watching her, waiting to see how she'd react to the depth of the threat. Magnus Rain wasn't just a competitor. He was a predator who destroyed 3 other companies in the past decade through increasingly elaborate schemes: blackmail, corporate espionage, while leveraging personal relationships to create vulnerabilities. He was methodical, patient, and apparently obsessed with destroying Lucien specifically. "Why you?" Celine asked after an hour of reading. "There are other billionaires, other companies. Why is he fixated on you specifically?" Lucien looked up from his laptop. "Because I embarrassed him. When I bought him out, I did it publicly, made sure everyone in the industry knew that his methods were toxic, that Blackridge was better off without him. You destroyed his reputation. I told the truth about who he was. He destroyed his own reputation. He doesn't see it that way. No, he sees me as the enemy, and he's been systematically dismantling everything I care about while waiting for the right moment to strike." Celine looked back down at the files. What happened to his last target? The CEO of Meridian Tech? Lucien's silence made her look up. His expression had gone dark. Magnus seduced the man's wife, made sure he found out about the affair in the most humiliating way possible. The CEO had a breakdown, stepped down. Company collapsed 6 months later. And the wife? Dead, car accident 3 weeks after the company went under. Police ruled it accidental, but everyone knew better. The weight of it settled over her like ice water. He killed her. He made sure she was in a position where dying was convenient. That's the same thing. Yes. Celine closed the folder and pushed it away. So this is what you were trying to protect me from. This is why you had me followed. Why you didn't tell me the truth. Yes. And you think he's planning to use me the same way? I think he's planning something worse. Lucien closed his laptop. Because he knows that the wife wasn't the actual weakness. The CEO cared more about his reputation than about her. But you care about me. I care about you more than anything in my empire, more than money or power or reputation, which makes you the most valuable weapon Magnus could possibly have. So what do? We wait, we watch, and we make sure that when he makes his move, we're ready. But what neither of them knew, what they couldn't have anticipated even with all their surveillance and planning and preparation, was that Magnus Rain had already made his move. That Marcus Webb's mission hadn't been to seduce Celine or blackmail Lucien or even gather intelligence. It had been to plant a tracking device in her bag during that single cup of tea in apartment 4C. A device so sophisticated that even Blackridge's security sweeps hadn't detected it yet. That right now, at this exact moment, Magnus Rain was sitting in his own penthouse across the city, listening to every word they said, watching every move they made, learning their weaknesses in real time, and that the real play wasn't coming, it had already begun. Bossettes. 3 days later, Adrian Cross, the real Adrian Cross, the actual architect from Seattle, whose identity Marcus Webb had stolen, contacted Celine directly through LinkedIn. The message was simple. I'm extremely concerned about the person impersonating me in your building. Can we meet? She showed it to Lucien immediately. They were in his home office, her sitting on the couch reviewing more files while he worked through acquisition documents that apparently couldn't wait even during a corporate war. It's a trap, Lucien said without looking up from his papers. Obviously. But what if it's not? Then it's still a trap, just a more sophisticated one. Celine stared at her laptop screen. We could use this. Flesh out Magnus's plan. By using you as bait. He finally looked up. Absolutely not. You said we were going to do this together, that I got to make my own decisions. I said that before someone sent you a message that's clearly designed to get you alone somewhere. Then we make sure I'm not alone. Your security team follows me. We control the location. We turn his trap into ours. Lucien stood up and crossed to the couch, sat down next to her close enough that their knees touched. Celine, listen to me. Magnus Rain has killed people, actually killed them. This isn't some corporate game where the worst thing that happens is you lose money. This is dangerous. I know. Then why are you even considering this? Because hiding in your tower while he circles us isn't working. She grabbed his hand. He's planning something. You said it yourself. And the longer we wait, the more time he has to position whatever nightmare he's building. At least this way we're taking initiative instead of just reacting. We don't even know if this is really Adrian Cross or another one of Magnus's people. So we verify. Your team can background check him. Video call first. Meet in a public place with security everywhere. She squeezed his fingers. I can do this. Let me do this. She watched him war with himself. Saw the terror fighting against logic, fighting against the promise he'd made to trust her with her own choices. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it my way. Complete security coverage, public location. First sign of anything suspicious, you're pulled out immediately." "Agreed. And you wear a wire. Full audio and video feed to my security team." "Fine. And I'm there. Not with you, but close enough to intervene if necessary." "Lucienne, that's not negotiable." His voice was steel. "You want to do this? Fine. But I'm not staying in the tower while you walk into potential danger. That's the deal." She looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who was trying so hard to let her make her own choices, while also being fundamentally incapable of not trying to protect her. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't equal. But it was probably the best compromise someone like Lucian Draven was capable of. "Okay," she said. "We do it your way." The relief on his face was complicated, like he'd won and lost at the same time. Mox. They arranged the meeting for 2 days later at a busy coffee shop in the middle of downtown. The kind of place with too many people and too much noise and security cameras everywhere. Lucienne's team swept it 3 times, positioned plainclothes agents at every table that had sightlines to where Celine would be sitting, set up surveillance across the street with high-powered directional microphones. Celine wore a wire disguised as a necklace, carried her normal bag with her normal phone. Dressed in jeans and a sweater like this was a casual coffee date instead of walking into a trap designed by a man who'd killed before. Lucian sat in an SUV parked 2 blocks away watching video feeds and trying not to lose his mind. She could hear him breathing through her earpiece, could feel his tension transmitted across digital signals. "I'm okay," she murmured while pretending to check her phone. "Stop hyperventilating." "I'm not hyperventilating. You're breathing like you just ran a marathon." "I'm fine." "Lucienne." A pause. Then, "If anything happens, nothing is going to happen. Your team has this place locked down tighter than the Pentagon." "That doesn't make me feel better." "I know." She smiled slightly. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes." "Good. Now shut up and let me focus." Adrian Cross walked in at exactly 2 p.m. tall, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, glasses that looked expensive and intellectual. He had the slightly rumpled look of someone who'd been traveling, which made sense given that he'd supposedly just flown in from Seattle after discovering someone had stolen his identity. He ordered coffee and sat down across from her with an expression that suggested he was genuinely disturbed by what had happened. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "I know this must be incredibly strange." Strange is one word for it. Celine wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup. "The FBI contacted you?" "Yes, about a week ago. They said someone had been using my identity to gain access to a residential building. When they told me which building, I looked up the residence and saw your name. You work for Lucian Draven?" "I used to. It's complicated. I can imagine." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I don't know what this guy wanted with you specifically, but I've spent the last week trying to figure out how he got all my information, my credentials, my portfolio, my entire professional history. And I think I know." He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward her. 6 months ago, I interviewed for a position with Obsidian Capital, Magnus Rain's company. They asked for extensive background materials, portfolio, references, detailed work history. I didn't get the job, or I thought I didn't. Now I'm wondering if the entire interview was just a way to collect my information. Celine stared at the tablet showing email correspondence between Adrian and Obsidian Capital HR. It looked legitimate, detailed, exactly the kind of paper trail you'd expect if Magnus had been planning this for months. "You think Magnus Rain orchestrated this?" she asked carefully. "I don't know what else to think. The timing is too perfect. And when the FBI explained why someone would want to impersonate me, to get close to someone connected to Lucian Draven, it all clicked into place." He leaned forward. "I know about their history. The partnership that went bad. Magnus has a reputation in the industry for being vindictive." In her ear, she heard Lucian's voice. "He's either telling the truth, or he's very well coached. We can't tell yet." Celine took a sip of coffee to buy herself time. So why contact me? Why not just let the FBI handle it? Because I want to help. If Magnus Rain stole my identity to hurt you or Lucien, then I'm involved whether I want to be or not. And honestly, I'm angry. Nobody gets to steal my life and use it to hurt people. It sounded genuine, felt genuine, but Celine had learned that genuine was the easiest thing to fake. What do you propose? She asked. Let me help you set a trap. I can reach out to Magnus directly, confront him about the identity theft, see if he makes a mistake. That's incredibly dangerous. So is doing nothing while he plans whatever he's planning. Adrian's voice was intense. Look, I don't know you. I don't know Lucien Draven beyond his reputation, but I know what it's like to have someone steal something from you, and I want to help make this right. In her ear, don't commit to anything. We need to vet him more thoroughly first. Celine nodded slowly. I appreciate the offer, but this is complicated and dangerous, and I need to discuss it with Lucien before agreeing to anything. Of course. I understand. Adrian handed her a business card, his real business card this time. That's my direct line. Call me when you're ready. They talked for another 10 minutes. Surface pleasantries. What it was like living in Seattle, the architecture project he was supposedly working on. Nothing substantial, nothing that couldn't have been researched and memorized. When they finally parted ways, Celine walked 3 blocks to where Lucien's SUV was waiting and climbed into the back seat. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. You okay? She asked. No. He pulled her against him. I'm absolutely not okay. Don't ever ask me to do that again. He seemed legitimate. He seemed exactly as legitimate as Magnus would want him to seem. Lucien's arms tightened around her. We're running every background check possible. If there's anything false about him, we'll find it. And if he's real? Then Magnus is even more sophisticated than I thought, because using a real person whose identity was stolen is a level of manipulation I didn't think even he was capable of. They drove back to Blackridge Tower in silence. Celine could feel Lucien's tension like a living thing, could feel how close he was to completely losing it. Talk to me, she said quietly. I can't do this. His voice was raw. I thought I could trust you to make your own choices. I thought I could let you be involved. But sitting in that van watching you have coffee with someone who might be working for Magnus, who might be planning to hurt you, who might be leading us into exactly the kind of trap we're trying to avoid. He stopped, breathed. I can't do this. Yes, you can. No, I really can't. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to lock you somewhere safe and handle this myself. Then you'll lose me. She pulled back to look at him. Because I won't be locked away. I won't be protected like some fragile thing that needs guarding. That's not love, Lucien. That's possession. I know, and it doesn't change how I feel. Then you have to choose. You have to decide if you're capable of loving me the way I need to be loved, or if your fear is always going to win. He looked at her with something broken in his eyes. What if I choose wrong? What if I trust you to be involved and something happens and I lose you because I was too afraid to be controlling? Then you lose me. But at least you lose me because you respected my choices instead of because you suffocated me. The SUV pulled into the underground garage. They sat in the back seat, not moving, while security waited outside. I'm trying, Lucien whispered. I'm trying so hard to be what you need. I know. I don't know if it's enough. Neither do I. She touched his face. But we keep trying anyway. They went upstairs, ate dinner in silence, pretended to work while actually just sitting in the same room taking comfort from proximity. Celine's phone rang at midnight. Unknown number. She looked at Lucien. He nodded. She answered. Hello? Celine Vey. A voice she didn't recognize. Male, cold, amused. We haven't been properly introduced. My name is Magnus Rain. Her blood went ice cold. How did you get this number? I've had this number for months. Just like I've had surveillance on you for months. Just like I've been planning this conversation since the moment I realized Lucien Draven had finally found something he actually cared about. Lucien was already moving, grabbed a second phone and started typing frantically, probably signaling his security team to trace the call. What do you want? Celine asked. I want to invite you to dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us. Why would I ever agree to that? Because if you don't, I'll release surveillance footage of you and Lucien to every media outlet in the city. Intimate footage, the kind that destroys reputations and makes both of you look like exactly the sort of people who abuse power dynamics in professional relationships. She couldn't breathe. You're blacking me. I'm offering you a choice. Have dinner with me. Let me explain why Lucien Draven is not the man you think he is. What happens after that is entirely up to you. And if I refuse, then by morning, everyone will know that Blackridge Industries' CEO is sleeping with his former employee. The board will call for his resignation. Shareholders will panic. His empire will start collapsing. And you'll be known as the woman who destroyed one of the most powerful men in the city by letting yourself be seduced by money and power. Celine looked at Lucien, watched him mouth the word no while continuing to type on his phone. I need time to think about it, she said. You have until noon tomorrow. I'll send you the details. Magnus's voice dropped. And Celine, if you tell Lucien about this call, I'll know. I have eyes everywhere. Make the choice yourself. For once in your life, make a choice that isn't being controlled by him. The line went dead. Celine stood frozen in the middle of Lucien's penthouse, holding a phone that felt like a bomb. Lucien crossed to her in 3 strides and took the phone from her shaking hands. What did he say? She told him. Watched his face go from concern to furious to something that looked like despair. He's bluffing, Lucien said. He doesn't have surveillance footage of us. Are you sure? Silence. Lucien, are you sure? He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. I thought my penthouse was secure. I thought we swept for devices regularly. But if Marcus Webb planted something months ago, if Magnus has access to technology I don't know about, then he might actually have footage. Yes. Celine sat down on the couch before her legs gave out. So what do? We don't do anything. I handle this. I'll contact Magnus directly. Threaten him back. We have dirt on his operations. We can... That's not what he wants. He specifically said I need to make the choice. That if you're involved, he'll release everything. He's trying to isolate you from me. That's the play. Get you alone and vulnerable. I know. She looked up at him. But what if he's also telling the truth? What if he does have footage? What happens to Blackridge if that gets released? Lucien crouched down in front of her, took her hands. I don't care what happens to Blackridge. Yes, you do. Not more than I care about you. Not more than I care about keeping you safe. But thousands of people work for your company. Their jobs, their families, their lives. She squeezed his hands. I can't be responsible for destroying all of that. You're not responsible. Magnus is responsible. He's the one threatening to release footage. He's the one making this choice. But I'm the one who has to decide whether to have dinner with him or let him destroy everything you've built. They stared at each other. The glass walls around them reflected the city lights, making it feel like they were floating in space instead of being trapped in a fortress. What do you want to do? Lucien asked quietly. I want to go. The words hurt coming out. I want to hear what he has to say. Find out what he actually wants. No. Lucien, absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near Magnus Rain. You said I get to make my own choices. Not when the choice is walking into obvious danger. Then what? She pulled her hands away. We just wait for him to release the footage? Watch your company collapse? Let him win? Better that than lose you. That's not your decision to make. She stood up. This is my choice. My risk. My life. And if he hurts you, if this is exactly the trap it looks like and you end up dead because I let you walk into it, then that's on me, not you. That's not how love works. Lucien stood up. That's not how any of this works. I don't get to just let you make choices that get you killed and then say it was your decision, so I'm not responsible. So what are you saying? That you're going to lock me in this tower? Keep me here against my will? If that's what it takes to keep you alive, yes. The word hung between them like a knife. Celine took a step back. You don't mean that. I absolutely mean that. You're not going to dinner with Magnus Rain. You're not having contact with him. You're staying here where it's safe, and we're going to figure this out another way. By controlling me. By protecting you. They're the same thing. Her voice cracked. Can't you see that? You keep saying you trust me. You keep promising you'll let me make my own choices. But the second those choices involve actual risk, you revert right back to trying to control everything. Because the risk is you dying. He grabbed her shoulders. I can't lose you. I won't lose you. And if that makes me controlling or possessive or every other thing you've accused me of being, fine. I'd rather have you alive and hating me than dead because I let you make a choice that got you killed. She wrenched away from him. Then we're done. Because I can't be with someone who treats love like ownership, who says the right words but can't actually follow through. Celine, no, I'm serious. If you actually try to keep me here against my will, if you actually think you have the right to make that choice for me, then we're finished. I'll walk out of here the second I can and you'll never see me again. You can't leave. It's not safe. Then I'll die free instead of living in your cage. They stood on opposite sides of the living room, two people who loved each other and were still managing to destroy everything anyway. Lucien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His face went pale. What? Celine asked. He turned the phone toward her. The screen showed a message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. See you tomorrow, Celine. And attached to it was a photo. Celine and Lucien in his bed. Naked, tangled together, intimate and private and never meant for anyone else's eyes. He has surveillance footage, Lucien whispered. He actually has it. Celine felt everything inside her go numb. So I have to go. No. Lucien, look at that photo. Look at what he has. If I don't go, he releases everything and destroys your company and ruins both our lives. I don't care. Let him release it. Let him destroy Blackridge. None of it matters compared to you. It matters to the thousands of people who work for you. It matters to the shareholders and the clients and everyone whose livelihood depends on your company staying intact. Their lives are not more important than yours. They are to me. She grabbed her bag, started shoving things into it. I'm going, tomorrow night. I'm having dinner with Magnus Rain, and I'm finding out what he wants, and I'm ending this. I'll have you physically restrained if necessary. She stopped, turned, looked at him standing there desperate and furious and completely serious. If you do that, I will never forgive you, ever. That's not protection, Lucien. That's kidnapping. I don't care. Yes, you do. She walked toward him, stopped just close enough to see the fear and love and absolute terror warring in his eyes. You care because deep down you know I'm right. You know that trying to control me isn't love. And you know that if you actually trap me here, you lose me anyway. His hands curled into fists. I can't just let you walk into danger. Then come with me, not visibly, but be there. Have your security team ready. If something goes wrong, pull me out. That doesn't make it safe. Nothing about this is safe, but it's my choice to make. The silence stretched. Outside, the city glittered like a circuit board, beautiful and cold and full of people who had no idea that up here in this glass tower, 2 people were making choices that might destroy everything. Finally, Lucien nodded, just once, the smallest movement. Okay, he said, we do it your way? Thank you. But the second something feels wrong, you leave. You don't stay to get more information. You don't try to handle it. You leave immediately. Agreed. And I'm close enough to reach you in under 30 seconds. Fine. And if he touches you, if he threatens you, if he does anything that makes you uncomfortable, I'll leave, I promise. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was already slipping away. I love you. I love you too. If anything happens to you, nothing is going to happen. But they both knew that was a lie, because Magnus Rain had been planning this for months, years maybe. And whatever happened at dinner tomorrow night was going to change everything. Celine just hoped they both survived it. The restaurant Magnus chose was called Vesper. High-end. Exclusive. The kind of place where reservations took months, and the waitstaff moved like trained dancers through dim lighting, designed to make everyone look like they belonged in a film noir. Celine arrived at exactly 7 p.m. wearing a black dress that Lucien had picked out because he said it made her look powerful instead of vulnerable. She wasn't sure it was working. The wire was smaller this time. Embedded in the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. Audio only because video would have been too obvious. Lucien was in a car 3 blocks away losing his mind while his security team positioned themselves throughout the restaurant disguised as wealthy diners, who definitely weren't carrying concealed weapons. Magnus Rain was already seated at a corner table with perfect sightlines to every entrance. He stood when she approached, and the first thing that struck her was how normal he looked. Mid-50s, silver hair styled impeccably, a suit that probably cost more than her car used to be worth before she'd sold it. He had the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and charity galas. Distinguished, trustworthy. She hated him on sight. "Celine," he extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." She didn't take it, just sat down in the chair the waiter pulled out for her. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You blackmailed me into being here. What do you want?" Magnus smiled and sat back down. "Direct. I appreciate that. Lucian always did have terrible taste in women, but at least you're honest about it." "You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you." He signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly with wine. Red. Expensive. Magnus poured without asking if she wanted any. "I know you lost your parents 3 years ago. I know the inheritance made you uncomfortable, so you spent most of it on charities that help accident victims. I know you took the job with Lucian because you wanted to disappear into a life that didn't require you to feel anything." Celine's hand curled around the wine glass, but she didn't drink. "Congratulations. You did a background check. Very impressive. I also know that Lucian has been manipulating you from the start. Here we go. He didn't hire you because of your resume." Magnus leaned forward. "He hired you because you fit a psychological profile. Young, attractive, recently traumatized, isolated from family and friends, financially dependent. You were the perfect target for someone who wanted complete control." "That's not what happened. Isn't it? Think about it. From the moment you started working for him, he systematically isolated you, moved you into his penthouse, made you dependent on his money and his protection, created a situation where leaving him would mean losing your home, your income, your entire life." In her ear, she heard Lucian's voice through the wire. "Don't listen to him. He's trying to get in your head." Celine took a sip of wine she didn't want. "You're projecting. Just because you use people doesn't mean everyone does. I use people honestly. I tell them exactly what I want and what they'll get in return. Lucian pretends to love you while systematically destroying your autonomy." Magnus pulled out a tablet and turned it toward her. "These are surveillance reports from his security team. Look at the dates." She looked. The reports started 4 weeks before she'd ever interviewed for the position at Blackridge. Detailed surveillance, her daily routines, where she lived, where she shopped, what coffee shop she frequented. Her blood went cold. "He was watching you for a month before you ever met," Magnus said quietly. "He identified you as a target, studied your patterns, made sure you'd see the job posting. You didn't find him, Celine. He found you. This is fabricated. The metadata is all there. Have your own tech expert verify it. Lucian Draven spent a month researching you before arranging your interview. He knew everything about you before you ever walked through his door." She couldn't breathe. Why would he do that? Because 10 months ago, his previous assistant quit after filing a restraining order against him. It was settled quietly with a 7-figure payout and an NDA. But word got around. No one in the industry would work for him after that. So he had to find someone outside the professional sphere, someone vulnerable, someone he could control from the beginning. "You're lying." Magnus pulled up another document. Legal paperwork. A restraining order filed by someone named Caroline Porter against Lucian Draven. Allegations of obsessive behavior, unwanted surveillance, controlling conduct that made her fear for her safety. "Call Caroline yourself if you don't believe me," Magnus said. "I'm sure she'd be happy to tell you what it's like to be Lucian Draven's obsession." In her ear, "Celine, this is all manufactured. Caroline Porter was a corporate spy. The restraining order was her exit strategy when we caught her. Don't believe anything he's showing you." But the doubt was already spreading like poison, because Lucian had surveilled her without her knowledge, had increased her security detail without telling her why, had admitted he'd been watching her for months, studying her habits, learning her patterns. What if it went back further than she'd known? "I can see you're thinking about it," Magnus said. "Good. That's the first step. Questioning whether the man who claims to love you has been manipulating you from the very beginning. What do you want from me? I want you to understand who you're actually with. I want you to see the truth before he destroys you the way he's destroyed everyone else who got too close. And then what? I'm supposed to thank you for enlightening me? You blackmailed me into coming here. You had someone impersonate an architect to get close to me. You're not some benevolent truth teller. You're just another predator. I never claimed to be anything else. Magnus refilled her wine glass. The difference is I'm honest about it. I told you exactly what would happen if you didn't come to dinner. No lies, no manipulation disguised as protection. Just a straightforward transaction. A transaction where you threatened to destroy my life. A transaction where I gave you a choice. Come to dinner and learn the truth. Or don't and live with the consequences. You chose to come. That was your decision. Celine wanted to throw the wine in his face, wanted to walk out. But she needed to know what his actual play was. Why he'd gone to all this trouble just to tell her things about Lucien that she already half suspected. Fine, she said. I'm here. I'm listening. Now tell me what you actually want. Magnus sat back and smiled. I want you to work for me. The words hit like cold water. Excuse me? You're in a unique position. You have access to Lucien's private life, his security systems, his vulnerabilities. I want you to give me that information. So I'm supposed to betray him for you? Why would I ever do that? Because once you realize he's been using you from the beginning, you'll want revenge. Because you're smart enough to know that Lucien Draven will eventually discard you the way he discards everyone. Because I'm offering you $10 million and immunity from whatever fallout happens when his empire collapses. $10 million. Enough to disappear anywhere in the world. Enough to start over completely. Enough to never be dependent on anyone ever again. And if I refuse, then I release the surveillance footage tonight. By morning, Lucien's reputation is destroyed. His board demands his resignation. His company stock crashes. And you become the woman who slept her way into proximity to power and paid the price when it all fell apart. In her ear, get out, now. This has gone far enough. But Celine stayed seated. Because something about this didn't make sense. Magnus Rain wasn't stupid. He wouldn't show her all his cards unless he was absolutely certain she couldn't do anything with the information. You're very confident I won't just tell Lucien everything you've said, she pointed out. Because even if you do, the damage is done. I've planted doubt. You'll spend the rest of your relationship wondering if he really loves you or if you were just a convenient target. You'll question every gesture, every word, every moment of tenderness. And eventually, that doubt will destroy what you have more effectively than any external threat. He was right. The poison was already working. Even knowing she was being manipulated, Celine couldn't stop the question spiraling through her head. Had Lucien really watched her for a month before they met? Had he chosen her specifically because she was vulnerable? Was every moment between them built on a foundation of calculated manipulation? I need proof, she said. Real proof, not documents that could be fabricated. Magnus pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Hit play on a video file. The screen showed Lucien in what looked like his office, but younger, maybe a year ago. He was talking to someone off camera. The audio was crystal clear. I need someone isolated, Lucien's voice said. No family, no close friends. Recent trauma that makes them vulnerable to protection. Young enough to be manageable, but old enough to be professional. Find me 3 candidates and run complete background checks. The person off camera responded, but the audio was muffled. Then Lucien again. I don't care about qualifications. I care about control. Find me someone who will be grateful for stability. Someone who won't ask too many questions. The video ended. Celine felt like she'd been punched in the chest. That was Lucien's voice, his office, his words. Talking about finding someone vulnerable and manageable. Talking about finding her. I have 12 more videos like that, Magnus said quietly. Conversations where Lucien discusses exactly how to manipulate you, how to make you dependent, how to ensure you never leave. Would you like to see them? No. Her voice came out broken. No, I've seen enough. In her ear, Lucien was saying something urgent, something desperate. But the words were just noise now, white static against the ringing in her head. He's been playing you from the beginning, Magnus continued. Everything you thought was love was just control. Everything you thought was protection was just possession. He identified you as a target and executed a plan to make you completely dependent on him. Stop. I'm trying to help you see. I said stop. She stood up fast enough that the chair scraped loudly against the floor. Other diners looked over. I need air. She walked toward the bathroom on legs that barely worked. made it into the single-occupancy restroom, and locked the door. Braced her hands on the marble sink and tried to remember how to breathe. The bracelet wire was still transmitting. She could hear Lucien through it, hear him saying her name over and over, hear the desperation in his voice. Celine, listen to me. Those videos are fake. Magnus has deep fake technology. He's manufactured everything you just saw. I never said those things. I never targeted you. Please, you have to believe me. But how could she believe him? How could she believe anything when she just watched him say those exact words in what looked like his actual office? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Just a link. She clicked it despite every instinct screaming not to. The link opened to a web page. More videos. Dozens of them. Lucien discussing her like she was a project, analyzing her psychological profile, planning how to make her trust him. It was systematic, detailed, horrifying. And in every single video, he looked exactly like himself, sounded exactly like himself. There were no obvious signs of digital manipulation. Another text. There are 18 more files. Would you like me to send them? Or would you prefer to stop lying to yourself about who Lucien Draven really is? Celine deleted the messages, turned off her phone, stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, and saw someone who looked exactly like she felt. Broken. Betrayed. Stupid for ever believing someone like Lucien could actually love her. She took off the bracelet wire, set it on the counter, walked out of the bathroom. Magnus was waiting by the restaurant entrance. He handed her a business card. Think about my offer, $10 million. A new life. Freedom from someone who's been controlling you since before you even knew his name. What exactly do you want from Lucien? Access to his private security systems. Complete financial records. Passwords to offshore accounts. Everything I need to dismantle what he built. And if I give you that, you'll destroy him. I'll destroy the empire he stole from me. What happens to him personally depends on how much he fights back. Celine looked at the card. Just a name and a phone number. No company. No title. Just Magnus Rain and a way to contact him when she'd made her decision. I need time, she said. You have 24 hours. After that, the surveillance footage goes public and this offer expires. She walked out into the night air. The car Lucien had sent was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door, but she didn't get in. Just started walking. Let the city swallow her while her phone stayed off and the wire lay abandoned in a restaurant bathroom. She walked for blocks, then miles. Let the night pass around her while her mind replayed every moment with Lucien through the new lens Magnus had forced her to see through. The way he'd watched her, studied her, made her dependent. Was it love? Or was it just the most sophisticated manipulation she'd ever experienced? By the time she finally stopped walking, she was standing outside an address she hadn't consciously decided to go to. A brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. The address listed on Caroline Porter's restraining order. Celine stood on the sidewalk staring at the building. This was insane. She should go back to Blackridge Tower, should talk to Lucien, should demand the truth instead of running away. But what if Magnus was right? What if talking to Lucien just meant getting pulled deeper into whatever manipulation he'd been running? She climbed the steps, rang the buzzer for apartment 2B. A woman's voice crackled through the intercom. Yes? Caroline Porter? A pause. Who's asking? My name is Celine Vey. I work for Lucien Draven. I need to talk to you. Long silence. Then, you should leave. Trust me. Just leave and never look back. Please. I just need 5 minutes. I need to know if what Magnus Rain told me is true. Another pause. Then the door buzzed open. Caroline Porter looked tired. That was the first thing Celine noticed. She was maybe 35 with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of drawn expression that came from not sleeping well for a very long time. She stood in her doorway with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the apartment was warm. You're his new one, Caroline said. Not a question. We're together. Yes. Then you're already trapped. He doesn't let go once he has you. They sat in Caroline's small living room that felt nothing like Lucien's pristine penthouse. This space was cluttered, lived in, full of books and plants and the kind of comfortable mess that suggested an actual human being lived here instead of a carefully curated image. Tell me what happened, Celine said. Caroline wrapped her hands around a mug of tea she'd made but wasn't drinking. I started working for him 18 months ago. Executive assistant. It seemed like a dream job at first. Great pay. Interesting work. He was professional, respectful, everything you'd want in an employer. When did it change? Gradually. So gradually I didn't notice at first. He started asking personal questions. Nothing inappropriate, just showing interest. I thought we were becoming friends. Then he moved me into the penthouse because he said the commute was inefficient. Made sense at the time. Seemed generous. Celine's chest tightened. The story was familiar. After I moved in, things accelerated. He was always around, always watching, started making comments about where I went, who I saw. Framed it as concern, but it felt like surveillance. When I tried to establish boundaries, he'd get cold, distant, like I'd personally offended him by wanting space. Did he ever hurt you? Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically? He dismantled me piece by piece, made me doubt my own perceptions, made me think I was crazy for feeling controlled. And when I finally worked up the courage to quit, she stopped. Set down the tea with shaking hands. He told me I couldn't leave, that he'd make sure I never worked in this industry again, that he'd destroy my reputation, that no one would believe me over him. So you filed the restraining order. I filed the restraining order and he paid me $7 million to sign an NDA and disappear. Said if I ever talked about what happened, he'd sue me into oblivion. Caroline looked at Celine with something like pity. So why am I telling you this? Because you look exactly like I did 18 months ago. And someone should have warned me. Celine couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the confirmation that everything Magnus said was true. That Lucien was exactly who Magnus claimed. A predator who identified vulnerable women and systematically broke them down. Did Magnus Rain contact you? She asked. Caroline nodded. 2 months ago. Wanted me to testify against Lucien. I refused. The NDA is ironclad and honestly, I just want to move on with my life. But you're talking to me because you're not a lawyer. You're not law enforcement. You're just someone who's about to make the same mistakes I did. And maybe if I can stop that from happening, it's worth the risk. Celine stood up. She needed to leave, needed to think, needed to figure out how everything she thought she knew had been wrong. Thank you, she managed, for telling me the truth. Just promise me you'll leave him before he destroys you completely. She walked out into the night, turned her phone back on. 37 missed calls from Lucien, 15 voicemails, text messages that went from concerned to desperate to something that looked like panic. The most recent one read, "Please come back. Let me explain. Nothing you saw is real. I love you. Please." She should go back to him, should demand explanations, should give him a chance to defend himself. Instead, she pulled out Magnus Rain's business card and typed a message. "I'll do it. Tell me what you need." The response came back instantly. "Smart choice. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I'll give you instructions." Celine stood on a dark street corner in a city that suddenly felt like a trap. Everything she'd built with Lucien was a lie. Everything she'd felt was manipulation. Everything she'd trusted was designed to control her. And now she was about to betray him completely. But what if Magnus was lying? What if the videos were fake? What if Caroline Porter was part of some elaborate scheme to turn her against Lucien? Her phone rang. "Lucien." She answered. "Celine." His voice was destroyed. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm fine." "Please come back. Please let me explain what you saw. Magnus has technology that can fabricate anything. Those videos weren't real. I never said those things. I never targeted you." Caroline Porter says differently. Silence. Then, "You went to see Caroline?" I needed to hear from someone else who'd been through this. Someone who could tell me if Magnus was telling the truth. And what did she tell you? That you're exactly who Magnus says you are. That you identify vulnerable women and systematically break them down. That you paid her $7 million to stay quiet about what you did. That's not what happened. Caroline was corporate espionage. She was planted by a competitor to steal information. When we discovered it, she filed a false restraining order to cover her tracks. We paid her to go away quietly instead of dragging everything through public litigation. That's convenient. It's the truth. How would I know? How would I ever know what's true when everything I've seen tonight suggests you've been manipulating me from before we even met? She heard him breathing hard on the other end, heard something crash in the background. When he spoke again, his voice had gone quiet, dangerous. What did Magnus offer you? It doesn't matter. What did he offer you, Celine? $10 million to give him access to your security systems and financial records. And you're considering it. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I see. His voice had gone cold, empty. So that's it. You believe him over me. You're going to betray me based on fabricated videos and the word of a corporate spy. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then let me make it simple for you. If you give Magnus access to my systems, he won't just destroy me. He'll destroy everyone. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. Pension funds will collapse. People's entire lives will be ruined, and it will all be on you. Don't put that on me. I'm the one who loved you honestly from the moment you walked into my life. But if you can't see that, if you'd rather believe Magnus Rain's lies because they fit the narrative you've already decided about me, then there's nothing I can do. Lucienne, do what you're going to do, Celine. Make your choice. But understand that once you cross that line, there's no coming back. You'll have to live with the consequences of who you become. The line went dead. Celine stood there holding her phone in the dark. The city moved around her, cars passing, people living their lives. Everyone completely unaware that she was standing at the fulcrum point of a decision that would destroy someone no matter what she chose. She thought about Lu Shen, about the way he'd looked at her in his kitchen the first time, about how he'd learned to cook just to spend time with her, about how he'd tried so hard to let her make her own choices, even when terror screamed at him to lock her away. She thought about the surveillance reports that showed he'd been watching her before they met, about the videos of him discussing how to manipulate her, about Caroline Porter's story that matched every warning sign she'd ignored. She thought about Magnus Rain, about how he'd orchestrated everything, about how he'd known exactly which buttons to push, about how $10 million could buy freedom from ever being trapped again. And then she thought about what kind of person she wanted to be, what she could live with, what line she wasn't willing to cross no matter what had been done to her. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Don't trust either of them. There's something you need to see. Riverside Overlook. 1 hour. Come alone if you want the truth. No signature. No name. Just coordinates and a time. This was how people got killed. Meeting mysterious contacts at midnight in isolated locations. Every survival instinct she had screamed to ignore the message, to go back to Blackridge Tower, to demand answers from Lucian face to face. But she'd already destroyed her ability to trust him, and she wasn't naive enough to fully trust Magnus either. So maybe she needed to hear from whoever was offering a third option. Celine checked the time, 11:47 p.m. The Riverside Overlook was 20 minutes away. If she went, she'd get there with time to scope it out, see if it was obviously a trap. If she didn't go, she'd spend the rest of her life wondering what information she'd missed. She started walking. The Riverside Overlook was exactly what it sounded like. A scenic viewpoint where tourists took photos during the day and couples made out at night. Right now, at 15 minutes past midnight, it was deserted except for a single figure standing by the railing looking out over dark water. As Celine got closer, her stomach dropped. Adrian Cross. The real one, according to Lucian's security team, the architect whose identity had been stolen. He turned when he heard her footsteps. In the dim light from the city behind them, she could see his face clearly for the first time, and something about his expression made her blood run cold. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I promise what I'm about to tell you is the truth." "Who are you really?" "I'm exactly who I said I was. Adrian Cross, architect from Seattle. But that's not why I contacted you." He pulled out a phone and held it up. 6 months ago, Magnus Rain hired me to interview for a fake position. I thought it was strange, but the money was good, so I did it. Gave them my portfolio, my credentials, everything. I know. Magnus told me he stole your identity. That's what he wanted you to think. But that's not what happened. Adrian tapped the phone screen. 3 weeks ago, I got an email from someone claiming to be Lucian Draven's head of security. They sent me surveillance footage showing that Marcus Webb had been impersonating me, told me the FBI was involved, asked me to help set a trap. Celine's chest tightened. But that's what actually happened. The FBI did contact you. No, the FBI never contacted me. Blackridge Security did. And when I asked them how Marcus Webb got my information, they said Magnus Rain stole it during the job interview. He turned the phone toward her. But here's what they didn't tell you. Here's what I found when I started digging on my own. The screen showed financial records, money transfers, corporate documents. Marcus Webb doesn't work for Magnus Rain, Adrian said quietly. He works for Lucian Draven. He always has. The entire thing was staged. The fake neighbor, the water leak. All of it was designed to make you think Magnus was targeting you so that when Magnus actually contacted you, you'd already be primed to distrust him. That's impossible. Look at the money trail. Webb's salary comes from a shell company owned by Blackridge Industries. His apartment rental was paid by the same company. Everything about him traces back to Lucian, not Magnus. Celine stared at the financial documents, at the undeniable paper trail showing that Marcus Webb was on Lucian's payroll, that everything she'd thought was Magnus attacking her had actually been Lucian orchestrating an elaborate manipulation. Why? Her voice came out broken. Why would Lucian do this? Because Magnus was getting close to something that would destroy Lucian completely. So Lucian created a scenario where you'd distrust Magnus before he ever approached you, made you think you were being targeted, so you'd run to Lucian for protection instead of listening to what Magnus actually wanted to tell you. Which was what? Adrian pulled up another document. Magnus isn't trying to destroy Lucian's company. He's trying to expose him. Because Lucian Draven has been running illegal operations through Blackridge for years. Money laundering, fraud, offshore accounts. Magnus has evidence of all of it. And when he tried to go public, Lucian launched a smear campaign to destroy his credibility. The document showed financial records, offshore accounts in Lucian's name, wire transfers that looked exactly like money laundering, corporate fraud spanning back 5 years. Magnus approached you because he thought you'd want the truth, Adrian continued. He thought you deserved to know who you were actually with. But Lucian anticipated that, so he manufactured the entire threat scenario to make you distrust Magnus before he ever made contact. Celine backed away from the railing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't all be another layer of manipulation on top of manipulation on top of lies. How do I know you're telling the truth? She demanded. How do I know you're not part of this too? You don't. That's the point. Lucian has made it impossible for you to trust anyone, including him, including Magnus, including yourself. Adrian put away his phone. But ask yourself this. If Marcus Webb really worked for Magnus, why would Blackridge Security know about it? How would they have identified him so quickly? Why would the entire thing resolve so cleanly with you safely back in Lucian's penthouse exactly when he needed you vulnerable and dependent? Because it was all theater, all manipulation. Lucian had created the threat so he could protect her from it, had made her feel unsafe so she'd run to him for safety, had systematically isolated her from anyone who might tell her the truth. I'm going to be sick, Celine whispered. I'm sorry. I know this is a lot. But you needed to know before you made any decisions about what to do next. What am I supposed to do? Everyone is lying. Everyone has an agenda. I don't know what's real anymore. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to figure out who's telling the truth and start figuring out what you can verify yourself. Adrian handed her a flash drive. This has everything: financial records, email correspondence, proof that Webb works for Lucian. Take it to a forensic accountant, someone with no connection to either of them. Get independent verification. Celine took the drive with numb fingers. And whatever you decide, Adrian said quietly, make sure it's your decision, not Lucien's, not Magnus's, yours. He walked away into the darkness, leaving her alone on the overlook, staring at a flash drive that supposedly contained proof that the man she loved was a criminal who'd been manipulating her since before they'd ever met. Her phone rang. Lucian again. She didn't answer, just stood there watching the dark water flow past while the city glowed behind her and everything she'd thought she understood disintegrated into ash. Finally, she turned off her phone completely, walked back to her old apartment, the one Magnus's people hadn't compromised, the one Lucian's security didn't know about. She sat on her second-hand couch in the dark and held a flash drive that might prove Lucian was a criminal, or might prove he was innocent, or might be another layer of manipulation she was too exhausted to see through. And she realized that Adrian was right. She'd been so focused on figuring out who to trust that she'd stopped trusting herself. So maybe it was time to stop listening to anyone else. Stop trying to parse truth from lies. Stop looking for someone to tell her what to do. Maybe it was time to make her own choice, whatever the consequences. Celine opened her laptop, plugged in the flash drive, started reading through documents that would either save her or destroy her depending on what she decided to do with the information. And outside her window, across the city, in the penthouse of Blackridge Tower, Lucian Draven stood by the glass walls staring out at a city that suddenly felt empty without her in it. His phone rang. His security chief. "We have a problem," the voice said. "Adrian Cross just made contact with her. He gave her the financial files." Lucian's hand curled into a fist against the glass hard enough that his knuckles went white. "How much does she know?" "Everything. Webb's employment records, the offshore accounts, all of it. Find her. Bring her back. Whatever it takes." "Sir, if we use force..." "Use? I don't care." His control finally shattered completely. "Find her and bring her back before she does something that destroys us both." The line went dead, and in her dark apartment, Celine kept reading, kept learning, kept discovering exactly how deep the manipulation went, until she finally reached the last document on the drive, and understood that everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie from the very beginning. The last document on the flash drive was a video file. Celine's hand hovered over the mouse for 10 full seconds before she clicked it. The screen went black, then resolved into grainy security footage. A conference room. High-end. Expensive furniture. Two men sitting across from each other at a polished table. Lucian Draven and Magnus Rain. The timestamp read 6 months ago. Celine's blood turned to ice. "So we're in agreement," Magnus said on the recording. His voice was calm, professional. Nothing like the threatening predator from the restaurant. "You fabricate the corporate espionage angle. I play the vengeful ex-partner. We make her think she's caught between us." Lucian leaned back in his chair. "And you're certain this will work?" "It always works. Create enough chaos and confusion, and people stop trusting their own judgment. They become dependent on whoever offers them stability." Magnus smiled. "In this case, you. You get to be the protector, the one constant in her life while everything else falls apart. What do you get out of this? 20 million and access to the Meridian merger documents. You get a woman so traumatized and isolated that she'll never leave you. I get leverage for my next play. Everyone wins." Lucian nodded slowly. "And Adrian Cross? Already on payroll. He'll deliver the financial documents right on schedule. Make her think she's discovered some great conspiracy. By the time she realizes the documents are fabricated, she'll be too deep to climb out. Caroline Porter? Coached and paid. She'll tell whatever story we need her to tell. 7 million buys a lot of cooperation." The video ended. Celine sat frozen on her couch, staring at a black screen that had just destroyed what was left of her ability to trust reality. Everything had been theater. Every single moment of the past few months had been two billionaires playing an elaborate game with her life as the prize. The surveillance report showing Lucian had watched her before they met. Real. The corporate threat from Magnus. Fake. Marcus Webb's identity theft. Staged. Adrian Cross's concerned revelations. Scripted. Caroline Porter's testimony. Bought and paid for. Every single thing that had made her doubt, question, fear, trust, or feel anything had been manufactured by two men who saw her as nothing more than a pawn in whatever sick game they were playing. She was going to kill them both. The thought came crystal clear. Celine had never been violent, had never even imagined hurting someone. But sitting in her dark apartment with proof that her entire life had been manipulated for entertainment, she understood why people committed murder. Her phone buzzed. Still off, but the vibration of an incoming message strong enough to feel through the powered-down device. She turned it on. 17 missed calls from Lucy. 9 from unknown numbers that were probably Magnus, and 1 new text from a number she didn't recognize. "By now you've seen the video. I'm sorry. I thought you deserved to know the truth. Meet me at Blackridge Tower, underground garage, entrance C, 1 hour. I can help you end this. Victoria." Victoria. Lucien's assistant, the sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could kill someone with a stapler. This could be another trap. Probably was another trap. But Celine was done running, Done hiding. Done being the helpless piece that got moved around the board by players who thought they were smarter than her. She grabbed her bag, checked the time. 2:47 a.m. The city would be mostly empty. Good. She didn't want witnesses for what was about to happen. The subway was running skeleton service. She took 3 different trains, doubling back twice to make sure nobody was following her. Old habits from a life before Lucian. Before she'd been stupid enough to think billionaires fell in love with normal people for any reason other than control. Blackridge Tower loomed against the night sky like a monument to everything she'd lost. She approached entrance C of the underground garage. Security cameras everywhere, but she didn't care anymore. Let them watch. Let them see her coming. Victoria was waiting by a black sedan. She looked exhausted, worried, nothing like the composed professional Celine had met before. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've watched Lucian destroy too many people, and this time it's gone too far." She opened the car door. "Get in. We don't have much time." Celine didn't move. "How do I know you're not part of this too?" "You don't. But you came anyway because you're ready to burn everything down, and you need someone on the inside to help you do it." Victoria's expression was hard. "I've worked for Lucien for 8 years. I've watched him manipulate markets, destroy competitors, ruin lives. I told myself it was just business. But what he did to you, what they both did, that's not business. That's sadism. So you want revenge too. I want out. And the only way out is to take him down completely." Celine got in the car. They drove deeper into the parking structure, down to a level that required keycards and retinal scans, down to where Blackridge's real security operated, where the servers that ran Lucian's empire were housed, where all the secrets were kept. "I need you to understand something," Victoria said as she parked. "What you saw on that video? That was 6 months ago. The plan has been running since then. Everything you've experienced, everything you've felt, all manufactured." "I know. But here's what you don't know. Magnus isn't in it for $20 million. He's in it because Lucien has something on him, something catastrophic. And this entire game has been Lucien's way of proving he still has complete control." "What does he have?" Victoria pulled out a tablet, showed her photographs. Magnus Rain with a young woman who was very clearly underage. Financial documents showing payments to keep her quiet. Evidence of statutory rape and human trafficking spanning back years. Lucien discovered this 2 years ago. He's been using it to force Magnus to cooperate with whatever schemes he dreams up. The partnership didn't end badly. It never ended. Magnus is just a puppet Lucien uses when he needs someone to play the villain. Celine felt sick. So Magnus didn't want to hurt me. He was forced to participate. He's not innocent. Don't make that mistake. But he's also not the mastermind you think he is. Lucien is. Lucien has always been. What's the end game? Why do all this just to control me?" Victoria's expression went dark. "Because you're not the first. You're the 9th. Lucien has done this 8 times before with 8 different women, creates elaborate scenarios where they think they're being threatened, positions himself as the protector, slowly breaks them down until they're completely dependent, and when he's bored, he discards them with ND as and enough money to disappear." Caroline Porter was real then. Caroline was number 7. She got smart enough to run before he completely destroyed her. "You're number 9. Victoria leaned forward. "I'm helping you because I'm done watching him do this. And because number 8 killed herself 3 months ago when she couldn't handle what he'd turned her into." The air left Celine's lungs. "He killed someone. He drove someone to kill themselves, which is effectively the same thing." Victoria opened the car door. "So here's what I'm offering. Full access to Lucian's private servers. Every file, every document, every piece of evidence showing what he's done. You take it to the FBI. You destroy him completely. And I disappear before he realizes I'm the one who betrayed him." "Why not go to the FBI yourself?" "Because I'm complicit. I've helped him do this for years. The best I can hope for is immunity if I cooperate. But you? You're a victim. You're sympathetic. You're the one who can actually make this stick." Celine followed Victoria out of the car, into a secure elevator that descended even further, into the belly of Blackridge Tower where the real operations happened, where Lucian kept everything he couldn't afford to have discovered. The server room was massive, row after row of machines humming with the sound of data being processed. Victoria led her to a terminal in the corner and logged in with credentials that shouldn't have worked but did. "You have 20 minutes before the security sweep," Victoria said. "Download everything in the folder marked Omega Protocol. That's where he keeps the files on all his previous targets. Everything you need to prove he's been doing this systematically." Celine plugged in a portable drive and started the download. Watched the progress bar creep forward while her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She was stealing corporate data from one of the most powerful men in the city. She'd go to prison if this didn't work. She'd probably go to prison even if it did work. The progress bar hit 93% when the lights in the server room turned red. "No," Victoria whispered. "No, that's too early. The sweep isn't supposed to happen for another—" The elevator doors opened. Lucien stepped out, flanked by 4 security personnel who looked ex-military. His face was calm, controlled, but his eyes were absolutely murderous. "Victoria," he said quietly, "I'm disappointed." "Run!" Victoria shoved Celine toward a side exit. "Take the service stairs. Go!" Celine grabbed the portable drive, even though the download wasn't complete, and ran. Behind her, she heard Victoria screaming something defiant, heard Lucien's voice cold and commanding, heard footsteps pounding after her. The service stairwell was concrete and fluorescent lights. She took the stairs 3 at a time, going up because down led nowhere except more parking levels with no street access. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. The portable drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hand. She burst through a door into an executive floor, glass offices, expensive furniture, empty at 3 in the morning. She kept running, found another stairwell, kept climbing. Behind her, the door crashed open. Security was close. Too close. She made it to the 47th floor before hands grabbed her from behind and slammed her against the wall hard enough that the air exploded from her lungs. The portable drive flew from her grip and skittered across polished marble. One of the security guys pinned her while another retrieved the drive. They hauled her back down the hallway, back toward the elevator, back toward Lucien. He was waiting in his private office. The penthouse was above them, but apparently he wanted this conversation to happen in a space designed for business, for transactions, for the kind of cold calculations he specialized in. The security team shoved her into a chair. Lucien dismissed them with a gesture. They left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he set the portable drive on his desk. "Did you really think that would work?" he asked. "Where's Victoria?" "Being dealt with. She made a poor choice tonight. Several poor choices over the past few weeks, actually. I've been watching her communications with Magnus, wondering when she'd make her move." He sat down behind his desk. "I knew she'd contact you eventually, just didn't expect it to be quite this soon. So this was another trap. This was me giving you enough rope to hang yourself with, to see if you'd actually go through with betraying me, or if some part of you still trusted what we had." Celine laughed. It came out harsh and broken. "What we had? We never had anything. You orchestrated everything from the beginning. You and Magnus playing games with my life." "Magnus is a useful tool, nothing more. He's a rapist you're blackmailing. He's a predator I keep on a leash. There's a difference." Lucien leaned forward. "And yes, I orchestrated our meeting. I identified you as someone who would be compatible with me. I created circumstances where you'd be grateful for stability. I eliminated variables that might have interfered. Is that manipulation? Absolutely. But it's not meaningfully different from what everyone does when they're trying to win someone's affection. I was just more efficient about it. You drove a woman to suicide." His expression flickered, just for a second. Then the mask was back. "Rebecca had pre-existing mental health issues. I didn't cause her death any more than I caused your parents' accident. You used her trauma against her, broke her down systematically, made her completely dependent on you, and then threw her away. I ended a relationship that wasn't working. She chose how to respond to that. Celine wanted to throw something at him, wanted to scream, wanted to claw that calm expression off his face. How many women before me? Does it matter? Yes. 8. You were supposed to be number 9, but you turned out to be more complicated than the others, more resistant, more willing to question." He picked up the portable drive. "Which is why I'm going to make you an offer. I don't want anything from you. You want revenge. You want to see me destroyed. You want justice for what I've done." He turned the drive over in his hands. "The problem is, you can't have any of those things. The files on this drive are encrypted with technology you don't have access to. Victoria gave you the download, but not the decryption keys. Without me, it's useless." "Someone can crack the encryption. Not before my legal team buries you in litigation. Not before I produce evidence that you were a willing participant in corporate espionage. Not before I systematically destroy your credibility and reputation so thoroughly that no one will believe a word you say. The FBI will be very interested in the offshore accounts in your name. The wire transfers that supposedly went to your deceased parents' charity, but actually went to shell companies. The evidence of fraud that I've been carefully building for months in case I needed leverage." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You think you're going to destroy me? I've already destroyed you. You just don't know it yet." Her hands were shaking. "Then what's the offer? Stay. Be with me. Accept that this is what our relationship is and stop fighting it." He set down the drive. "I'll delete the fabricated evidence, give you actual access to my life, make you a genuine partner instead of a project. You get security, wealth, and my complete honesty about who I am and what I've done. And if I refuse, then you leave here tonight and by tomorrow morning, you're a wanted criminal. I have evidence placing you at the scene of multiple corporate thefts. I have financial records showing you've been embezzling from Blackridge Industries for months. I have testimony from employees saying you've been unstable, threatening, dangerous." His voice never changed. Still calm, still controlled. "You'll spend the next decade in prison, and when you get out, you'll have nothing except the memory of what you could have had if you'd just been smart enough to accept reality." Celine stared at him. At this man who'd whispered that he loved her, who'd tried to change for her, who'd been playing an elaborate game where every moment of vulnerability had been calculated to make her trust him. "You're a monster," she said quietly. "I'm a man who knows what he wants and takes it. The world is full of monsters, Celine. I'm just honest about it. You're not honest about anything. I'm being honest now. Stay with me. Accept the terms. Or spend the rest of your life regretting that you were too proud to take the best option available." She wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him to go straight to hell. Wanted to walk out and damn the consequences. But he was right. He'd built a cage so perfect that every exit led to destruction. Stay and be owned. Leave and be destroyed. Those were the only choices he'd left her. Except there was always a third option. The one nobody expected because it required being willing to lose everything. "I need to think about it," Celine said. "You have until morning. I'll have a contract drawn up. Sign it and we move forward on my terms. Don't sign it and I make the call to the FBI at 8 a.m. I want to see Victoria. Make sure she's okay. Victoria is being handled. You don't need to concern yourself with her. I need to know you didn't hurt her." Lucian studied her face, looking for the trap, looking for the angle. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. You have 5 minutes." He made a call, spoke quietly to someone, then stood and led her back to the elevator. They descended in silence to a floor Celine had never seen before. Corporate security, the kind of place where problems were solved quietly before they became public. Victoria was in a small conference room. Unharmed, but her hands were zip-tied to the chair. Her face was pale but composed. When she saw Celine, something like relief flashed across her expression. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. "I thought we had more time." "It's okay." Celine crossed to her, leaned down like she was checking the zip ties, put her mouth near Victoria's ear and whispered so quietly that Lucian couldn't possibly hear. "Server room, access panel behind rack 7. Emergency override. Code is your birthday backward." Victoria's eyes widened slightly. The tiniest nod. Celine straightened and turned back to Lucien. "Thank you. I needed to know you hadn't killed her." "I don't kill people, Celine. I just make them irrelevant." They went back to his office. He poured himself a drink, offered her one. She refused. They sat in silence while the city started to wake up beyond the windows, first light painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. "I'll sign your contract," Celine said finally. Lucian looked at her, really looked, searching for deception. "Just like that? Just like that. You're right. I don't have better options. And maybe this is what love looks like for someone like you. Control disguised as protection. Ownership disguised as partnership. It's more honest than whatever fairy tale you were imagining. Probably. She stood up. But I need to go back to my apartment first. Get my things. Say goodbye to the life I thought I was going to have. I'll send someone with you. No, if I'm doing this, if I'm accepting that you own me, then I need a few hours to grieve what I'm giving up. Alone. She met his eyes. You've already won, Lucian. Let me have this one small thing. He considered it, weighed the risks against his certainty that he'd backed her into a corner with no escape. Finally nodded. You have until noon. After that, I'm sending security to retrieve you. Understood. She walked out of his office, into the elevator, down to the lobby where morning shift employees were starting to arrive, out into the street where the city was waking up oblivious to the fact that somewhere in its glass towers, monsters played games with people's lives. Celine walked 3 blocks, made sure no one was following her, then pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI White Collar Crime Division. How can I help you? My name is Celine Vey. I have information about criminal activity at Blackridge Industries. Fraud, embezzlement, blackmail, and evidence of systematic psychological abuse of at least 8 women over the past 5 years. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Vey. Do you have documentation? I have encrypted files that I need help accessing. I also have testimony from a witness currently being held against her will inside Blackridge Tower. And I have video evidence of the CEO conspiring to manufacture false criminal charges against me. A pause. Where are you right now? Safe. For the moment. But he's expecting me to come back at noon to sign a contract that would essentially make me his legal property. Can you come to our field office? If I do that, he'll know. He has people watching. I need you to come to me. Another pause. Longer this time. Ms. Vey, I need you to understand that what you're describing sounds like you might be in immediate danger. If you're being coerced, I'm not being coerced right now, but I will be if I go back. And there's a woman in that building who needs help immediately before he decides she's too much of a liability. Give me your location. I'm sending a team now. Celine gave her the address of a coffee shop 2 blocks away, sat down at a corner table and waited while her heart tried to hammer its way out of her chest. This was it, the point of no return. Either the FBI would believe her and investigate, or Lucien's fabricated evidence would be convincing enough to make her the criminal. Either way, her old life was over. Agent Chen arrived 40 minutes later with 2 other agents. They sat down across from Celine and listened while she explained everything. The manufactured threat, the conspiracy between Lucian and Magnus, the 8 previous women, Rebecca's suicide, Victoria's current imprisonment. That's a detailed story, Chen said carefully. But without evidence, Celine handed over the portable drive. It's encrypted, but there's a woman inside Blackridge Tower right now who has the decryption keys. Her name is Victoria Ashford. She's Lucian Draven's executive assistant, and she's being held in corporate security because she tried to help me escape. You want us to raid Blackridge Tower based on your testimony and an encrypted drive? I want you to get a warrant, bring in forensic accountants, interview Victoria, check offshore accounts, contact the families of the previous women Lucian targeted. Celine leaned forward. He's been doing this for years, systematically finding vulnerable women, isolating them, breaking them down. One of them killed herself. How many more before someone stops him? Chen exchanged looks with the other agents. We'll need your full cooperation, testimony, documentation of everything he's done. You'll have it, all of it, but you need to move fast. He's expecting me back at noon. When I don't show up, he'll know something's wrong. He'll start destroying evidence. We'll get a judge on the phone, start the warrant process. Chen stood. In the meantime, you're coming with us. Protective custody until we can assess the threat level. Celine followed them out to an unmarked car, climbed in the back and watched the city pass by while federal agents made calls about warrants and raids and taking down one of the most powerful men in the business world. Her phone buzzed. Lucian. Where are you? She didn't answer. Let it ring through to voicemail. Watched it buzz again immediately. Then a text. I know what you're doing. It won't work. Come back now and I'll forget this happened. Then another. Celine, don't make me hurt you to prove a point. Then, you have 1 hour. After that, I make the call to the FBI about the embezzlement. Your choice. She turned off her phone. He's threatening you, Chen observed from the front seat. He's been threatening me since the day we met. I just didn't realize it. They took her to the FBI field office, put her in a conference room with coffee and agents asking questions. She told them everything about the surveillance reports, the manufactured crisis with Marcus Webb, the video of Lucian and Magnus planning the whole thing, the offshore accounts, the previous victims. 6 hours later, they had their warrant. We're moving on Black Ridge Tower at 6 p.m., Chen told her. Simultaneous raids on the main offices and Lucian Draven's penthouse. We'll extract Victoria Ashford and secure all servers and documentation. He'll resist. Let him try. We have legal authority and enough probable cause to hold him for questioning while we sort through what you've given us. Celine watched from her monitor as FBI agents in tactical gear entered Black Ridge Tower. Watched them move through the building, securing floors. Watched them breach corporate security and find Victoria still zip-tied to a chair looking exhausted but alive. Watched them reach Lucian's office, where he sat calmly behind his desk, like he'd been expecting this. The audio feed crackled to life. Lucian Draven, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, blackmail, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. You have the right to remain silent. I want my lawyer. You'll have access to legal counsel, but right now, you're coming with us. Celine watched them put handcuffs on him, watched him look directly at the camera like he knew she was watching. His expression was calm, cold, promising that this wasn't over. But for the first time in months, she could breathe without feeling like she was suffocating. They held Lucian for 72 hours while forensic accountants tore through his financial records, while agents interviewed Victoria, while they contacted the families of previous victims and started building a case that looked more damning by the hour. Magnus Rain was arrested on day 2, brought in on charges related to the evidence Victoria had shown Celine: human trafficking, statutory rape, conspiracy. He tried to claim Lucian had fabricated everything, but the evidence was too solid. Caroline Porter came forward voluntarily on day 3, gave testimony about what Lucian had done to her, how he'd isolated her, controlled her, made her believe she was losing her mind. Other women came forward too. 6 more victims willing to testify about the systematic psychological abuse. By day 4, the case was solid enough that Lucian's legal team started talking about plea deals. Celine watched it all from protective custody, gave her testimony, signed statements, cooperated with every aspect of the investigation. On day 7, Agent Chen came to see her. "We have a problem," she said. Celine's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "The encrypted files Victoria gave you? They're real, but they're also not admissible as evidence because of how they were obtained. Lucien's lawyers are arguing everything was stolen illegally." "So he walks?" "Not necessarily. We have testimony from multiple victims. We have financial irregularities. We have enough to prosecute. But without the encrypted files, the case is weaker than we'd like." "What about Victoria? She had the decryption keys." "She's disappeared. We had her in a safe house, but she walked out 2 days ago. No one's seen her since." Fear spiked through Celine's chest. He got to her. We don't know that. She might have just decided she didn't want to be involved anymore. But without her testimony about the server contents, we're missing a key piece. Then get a warrant for the servers themselves. Get your own tech people to decrypt them. We tried. The encryption is military grade. It would take months to crack. Maybe years. Lucien's lawyers are pushing for a speedy trial. We don't have months. Celine stood up and started pacing. "So what are you saying? That after everything, he might actually beat this?" "I'm saying we need to be realistic about what we can prove versus what we know happened. The fraud charges will probably stick. Maybe some of the blackmail. But the systematic abuse? The previous victims? Without Victoria's testimony and the encrypted files, that's much harder to prove." "How long would he get for the fraud?" 5 to 10 years, maybe less with good behavior. 5 to 10 years for destroying 8 women's lives, for driving one of them to suicide, for systematically manipulating and controlling people like they were chess pieces. It wasn't enough. "What if I could get Victoria to come back?" Celine asked. "What if I could convince her to testify?" "Do you know where she is?" "No, but I might be able to find her." Chen considered this. "You're still under protective custody. Leaving would be risky." "Everything about this is risky. But if Victoria's testimony is the difference between justice and Lucian walking away with a slap on the wrist, then it's worth the risk. I can't officially authorize this. I'm not asking for official authorization. I'm asking you to look the other way for 24 hours while I try to fix this. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. I'm going to get coffee. When I come back, I expect you to still be here. But if you're not, I'll assume you needed some air and got lost finding your way back. She left. Celine waited exactly 30 seconds, then grabbed her bag and walked out of the FBI field office into a city that suddenly felt full of threats again. Lucien was in custody, but his people were still out there, his money, his influence, his network of employees who'd helped him do terrible things and had every reason to make sure the case fell apart. She needed to find Victoria before they did. The problem was she had no idea where to start looking. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Marina District, Pier 19, warehouse at the end. Come alone if you want answers. It could be a trap. Probably was a trap. But Celine was done playing it safe. She grabbed a cab and gave the driver the address, watched the city pass by while the sun set and shadows grew long across buildings that looked like tombstones marking the death of whatever naive person she'd been before meeting Lucien Draven. The warehouse was exactly where the text said it would be. Old, rusted, the kind of place where bodies got dumped in crime dramas. Celine walked toward it with her phone in her hand, ready to call 911 if anything went wrong. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness that smelled like salt water and rust and something else underneath. Something metallic and wrong. Hello? Her voice echoed in the empty space. Lights flickered on. Industrial overheads that revealed a huge open room full of shipping containers and empty pallets, and in the center, tied to a chair, was Victoria. She was alive but bleeding from a cut above her eye. Her hands were bound behind her. Her mouth was duct-taped shut. Victoria! Celine ran toward her. I wouldn't, a voice said from behind her. She spun around. A man stepped out from behind a shipping container, mid-40s, expensive suit. Face she didn't recognize, but something about his eyes suggested he was very used to hurting people. Who are you? I'm the person Lucien pays to solve problems when they get complicated, and you, Ms. Vey, are extremely complicated. He pulled out a gun. Nothing dramatic, just a simple weapon that he held with the casual ease of someone who'd used it before. Now, you're going to call your FBI handler and tell her you made a mistake, that you fabricated everything because you were angry about a bad breakup. You're going to recant your testimony. And if I don't? He walked over to Victoria and pressed the gun against her temple. Then I kill her right now and make sure her body is found with evidence suggesting you were the one who did it. Victoria was making sounds behind the duct tape, struggling against the ropes. Her eyes were wide with terror, but also something else, trying to communicate something Celine couldn't understand. Okay, Celine said. Okay, I'll do it. Just don't hurt her. Call Agent Chen, now. Celine pulled out her phone with shaking hands, found Chen's number. But before she could hit dial, Victoria suddenly threw herself backward in the chair. The man's gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet went wide and buried itself in a shipping container behind them. In that split second of chaos, Celine lunged. She wasn't trained, wasn't strong, wasn't anything except desperate and furious and done with men thinking they could control her. She hit him low and hard, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs, and the gun skittered across concrete. They scrambled for it. He was bigger, stronger, but she was willing to kill to survive, and that gave her an edge she'd never known she had. Her fingers closed around the grip. She rolled, brought it up, fired. The sound was impossibly loud. The kick threw her hand backward. The man dropped and didn't move. For a moment, Celine just lay there on cold concrete trying to remember how to breathe. Then she crawled over to Victoria and ripped the duct tape off. Are you okay? I'm fine. We need to get out of here. Now. He wasn't working alone. Celine cut Victoria's ropes with a knife she found on the dead man. They ran for the door. Made it outside where the night air felt like salvation. Victoria pulled out a phone from her pocket and made a call. It's done. We're both alive. Send the extraction team. Who are you calling? Celine demanded. FBI. I've been working with them since the night you stole the files. I disappeared to draw out Lucien's cleanup crew, make them think I was vulnerable so they'd make a move we could document. Victoria looked at her. You were bait. I'm sorry, but we needed to prove Lucien was willing to kill to keep this covered up. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. You used me. I saved you. There's a difference. Victoria touched her arm. Lucien's lawyer was going to argue that everything was just corporate espionage gone wrong, that you and I were competitors trying to destroy him. But now we have attempted murder. We have a body. We have proof that he'll kill to protect his secrets. The FBI arrived in force, secured the scene, took statements, found evidence on the dead man's phone showing texts from a burner account registered to one of Lucien's shell companies, orders to eliminate witnesses, to destroy evidence, to do whatever it took to make sure the case fell apart. By morning, Lucien's lawyers had stopped talking about plea deals. By afternoon, they were just trying to minimize how many life sentences he'd get. Celine sat in Agent Chen's office drinking coffee that tasted like cardboard, while prosecutors explained that with the new evidence, Lucien would likely die in prison, that Magnus Rain was facing similar charges, that the whole empire was coming down. What happens to me now? She asked. You testify at trial. After that, you're free to go wherever you want, start over, live whatever life you choose. Chen leaned forward. You did good, Ms. Vey. You could have walked away, could have taken his deal. Instead, you burned everything down to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You just made the hard one. Celine left the FBI office as the sun was setting over a city that looked different now, less threatening, more like just a place where people lived instead of a battlefield where monsters played games. Her phone buzzed one final time. A message from Lucien. He must have gotten access to a phone somehow. Maybe bribed a guard. Maybe called in the last favor he had left. You destroyed me. I hope it was worth it. She typed back one word. Yes. Then blocked the number and walked into the twilight knowing that she'd never be that naive again. Never trust that easily. Never believe that someone with that much power could love honestly. But she'd also never be controlled again. Never be owned. Never be reduced to a piece someone moved around a board. She was done being a pawn. Now she was the one who'd burned the board. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Celine sat in the courtroom every single day watching Lucien Drive-In's carefully constructed empire get dismantled piece by piece in front of cameras and journalists, and a judge who looked increasingly disgusted as evidence piled up. She watched him sit at the defense table in expensive suits that couldn't hide the fact that he was finally actually losing control. She watched his lawyers argue and object and try every legal maneuver they could think of to stop the bleeding. It didn't work. The prosecution presented financial records showing systematic fraud spanning back 8 years, offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering disguised as legitimate business transactions. They presented testimony from Victoria Ashford about the server rooms and the encrypted files and the systematic documentation of previous victims. They presented testimony from Caroline Porter, from 3 other women who'd survived Lucien's manipulation, from Rebecca's mother, who stood at the witness stand with tears streaming down her face and described finding her daughter's body after months of watching her deteriorate under Lucien's control. She used to be so strong, Rebecca's mother said, her voice breaking. Before she met him, she was confident, happy. And then slowly, month by month, I watched him hollow her out, turn her into someone who was terrified of everything, who couldn't make a decision without his permission, who believed she was worthless without him. The defense lawyer tried to object, tried to argue that this was speculation. The judge overruled him. She called me the night before she died, Rebecca's mother continued. She said she couldn't do it anymore. That living in his world had destroyed something fundamental inside her, that she didn't recognize herself. She begged me to help her leave him, and I told her to just pack a bag and come home. I told her I'd protect her. She stopped, wiped her eyes, looked directly at Lucien, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. The next morning, the police called to tell me she was dead. Drove her car off a bridge at 3 in the morning. No note, no explanation. But I know why she did it. She did it because he spent months convincing her that she was nothing without him, that the world was too dangerous for her alone, that leaving him would mean losing everything, including herself. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone crying in the gallery. And when I confronted him at her funeral, Rebecca's mother finished, do you know what he said to me? He said Rebecca had pre-existing mental health issues that I tried my best to accommodate. like she was a problem he'd dealt with, like her death was unfortunate but not his responsibility. Lucian's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, I have to object to this characterization. Sit down, counselor, the judge said. I want to hear the rest. Rebecca's mother looked at the jury. My daughter was murdered, not with a weapon, not with violence, but with systematic psychological abuse that destroyed her will to live. And if you let this man walk free, he'll do it again. Because men like him don't stop. They just find new victims. The defense tried to recover, tried to paint Celine as a disgruntled employee, tried to suggest that all the women who testified were coordinating their stories for financial gain, tried to argue that Lucien was a successful businessman being destroyed by vindictive people who couldn't handle the demands of his lifestyle. But then the prosecution played the video, the one from Adrian Cross's flash drive showing Lucien and Magnus planning the entire manipulation. The one that proved everything had been theater designed to break Celine down. The defense argued it was fabricated, demanded forensic analysis. The prosecution provided 3 independent experts who confirmed the video was authentic, that the metadata was real, that every frame showed exactly what it appeared to show. 2 billionaires conspiring to destroy a woman's sense of reality for entertainment and control. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Lucien's face didn't change when the verdict was read. He just sat there like the words were happening to someone else. Like even now, at the absolute end, he couldn't quite believe that he'd lost. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Lucien was remanded to custody. As the guards led him away, he looked directly at Celine for the first time since the trial began. His expression was empty, hollowed out. The mask finally gone because there was no point in maintaining it anymore. She didn't look away. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing fear or triumph or anything except someone who'd survived him and would keep surviving long after he was gone. The courtroom emptied slowly. Celine stayed in her seat while reporters rushed out to file stories and victims hugged each other and cried and tried to process that it was finally over. Victoria sat down next to her. She'd testified for 3 days straight, had exposed every detail of Lucien's operations, had burned her entire career in corporate law to make sure he went down. How are you feeling? Victoria asked. I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. Fair enough. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry I used you as bait that night at the warehouse. I know that's not something you can easily forgive. You saved my life before that, when you gave me the files, when you tried to help me escape. Celine looked at her. You could have stayed silent, could have kept collecting your salary, could have looked the other way like you'd been doing for years. I was complicit. I helped him do terrible things because I told myself it was just business, just how the world worked. Victoria's voice was rough. Rebecca's death was the line I couldn't uncross. Watching another young woman get pulled into his orbit after that, I couldn't do it again. What will you do now? Testify at Magnus's trial, then probably disappear for a while. I have some money saved. Maybe I'll move to a small town somewhere and work at a bookstore. Live a life that doesn't involve helping monsters destroy people. That sounds nice. What about you? Where do you go from here? Celine didn't have an answer. The past 6 weeks had been consumed by the trial, by testimony and evidence and reliving every moment of trauma in front of strangers. She hadn't thought about what came after. I don't know, she admitted. Figure out who I am when I'm not being manipulated. Figure out if I can ever trust anyone again. You will. It takes time, but you will. Victoria stood up. There's a support group for people who've survived this kind of psychological abuse. I can send you the information if you want. Maybe. Yeah. Send it. Victoria squeezed her shoulder and walked away, leaving Celine alone in a courtroom that felt bigger and emptier now that the performance was over. Her phone buzzed. Agent Chen. Sentencing is scheduled for the 15th. The prosecution is asking for consecutive sentences on all counts. He's looking at minimum 40 years, probably more. He'll die in prison. Good. How are you holding up? Everyone keeps asking me that. I still don't have an answer. That's normal. Trauma doesn't resolve on a convenient timeline. Chen paused. There's something else you should know. We found evidence that Lucien had been planning to have you killed if the trial went badly. Contract already drawn up. $500,000 to make you disappear. Celine felt nothing. The information should have terrified her, should have made her angry or scared or something. But she was too empty to feel anything except a distant acknowledgement that yes, of course he'd been planning to kill her. That's who he was. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "The contractor is in custody. You're safe. But I wanted you to know so you could factor it into how you move forward. This wasn't just control. This was someone who would have murdered you to protect himself." "I know." She hung up and sat in the empty courtroom until a janitor came in and politely asked if she was okay. She said yes, even though it was a lie, and walked out into afternoon sunlight that felt too bright after 6 weeks of fluorescent courtroom lighting. The city looked the same. People rushing to appointments, taxis honking, street vendors selling food. Nobody cared that a monster had just been convicted. Life just continued like justice was ordinary instead of the rarest thing in the world. Celine walked without direction. Let her feet carry her through neighborhoods she'd explored with Lucien back when she'd thought they were building something real. Past the street food vendor where they'd eaten dumplings at 2 a.m. Past the boutique where he'd bought her a dress she'd loved. Past all the places that used to mean something and now just meant she'd been a fool. She found herself standing outside her old apartment building, the one she'd lived in before Lucien. Before everything had gone sideways. Apartment 4C was vacant. Marcus Webb had disappeared the moment the FBI started investigating. Probably fled the country on Lucien's dime. The landlord had put up a for rent sign. Celine climbed the stairs to her old apartment. Someone else lived there now. She could hear music playing through the door, could smell cooking, could sense life happening in a space where she'd once tried to be invisible. She sat down in the hallway and cried for the first time since the trial started. Not because she missed Lucien, not because she was sad about what she'd lost, but because she was finally grieving the person she'd been before him. The woman who'd thought disappearing was the same as healing, who'd believed that not feeling was safer than being vulnerable. That woman was dead, killed by Lucien's manipulation, but also by Celine's own choices, by her willingness to accept crumbs of affection instead of demanding real partnership, by her fear of being alone that had made her ignore every red flag. She cried until she was empty, until there was nothing left except the hollow space where all that pain had been living. Then she stood up and walked down the stairs and out into the city that no longer felt like a trap. Sentencing happened on a Tuesday. The courtroom was packed, victims and their families, journalists, law students, people who'd followed the trial and wanted to see the ending. Lucien stood before the judge looking smaller than he'd ever looked in the penthouse. Prison had aged him. Or maybe it was just the first time Celine was seeing him without the armor of wealth and power. The judge read through the charges, the guilty verdicts, the sentencing guidelines. "Mr. Draven, you used your intelligence and resources to systematically destroy vulnerable people for your own gratification. You manipulated, controlled, and ultimately drove one woman to suicide while traumatizing at least 8 others. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the harm you caused. No indication that you understood your actions were anything other than sophisticated business strategy." Lucien's lawyer tried to interject. The judge held up a hand. "I've practiced law for 32 years. I've sentenced hundreds of defendants, but I've rarely encountered someone who caused this much damage while maintaining such complete psychological detachment from the consequences of their actions." The judge looked directly at Lucien. "You are a dangerous predator. And the only way to protect society from you is to ensure you never have the opportunity to harm anyone again." She sentenced him to 45 years on the fraud charges, 15 years on each count of blackmail and conspiracy. All sentences to run consecutively. By the time she finished, Lucien was looking at over a century in prison. He'd be 84 before he was eligible for parole on the first charge. He'd die in prison decades before he came up for release on the rest. The courtroom erupted. Victims hugging each other, reporters rushing to file. Lucien's mother sobbing in the back row, while his father sat stone-faced like he'd expected this all along. Celine felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just a bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting for months to make sure one person faced consequences for their actions. As guards led Lucien away, he turned and looked at her one final time. His mouth moved. She couldn't hear what he said over the noise, but she could read his lips. "I loved you." Maybe he actually believed it. Maybe in whatever twisted psychology governed his decisions, control and possession and systematic manipulation looked like love. Maybe he genuinely couldn't tell the difference. Celine turned away. walked out of the courtroom. Into the hallway where reporters tried to shove microphones in her face, asking how she felt now that justice had been served. She pushed past them without answering, made it to the street, called the one person she knew would understand what this felt like. Caroline Porter answered on the second ring. "Did you watch?" "I was there." "And?" "He got over 100 years. He'll die in prison." Caroline was quiet for a long moment, then, "Good. That's good. It doesn't fix anything, but it's something." "Do you ever feel better? After everything he did?" "Some days. Some days I wake up and forget for a few minutes that any of it happened. Other days I can barely get out of bed because the weight of it is too much." Caroline paused. "But it gets easier, slowly. The space between bad days gets longer. I don't know how to be a person anymore. I don't know how to trust my own judgment when I was so wrong about him." "You weren't wrong. He was exactly who you thought he was when you first met him. Controlling, obsessive, damaged. You just believed he could change, that love could fix him." Caroline's voice was gentle. "The mistake wasn't trusting him. The mistake was thinking someone else's brokenness was your responsibility to repair." "So what do I do now?" "You live. You figure out who you are when you're not being manipulated. You build a life that belongs to you, and maybe someday you trust someone again. Or maybe you don't. Both options are valid." They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing and everything. About Caroline's new job at a nonprofit. About the apartment she'd found in a neighborhood far from anything that reminded her of Lucian. About the small ways she was reclaiming her life. When they hung up, Celine felt marginally less alone. She walked to the Riverside Overlook, the place where Adrian Cross had given her the flash drive that started everything. It was early evening, and the city was spread out below her, glittering with lights like scattered diamonds. Someone was standing at the railing. For a split second, Celine's heart stopped thinking it was Lucian, somehow coming for her. But it was just a stranger. A woman maybe 10 years older looking out at the water with the kind of expression that suggested she was working through her own complicated history. They stood there in silence for a while. Two people who didn't know each other contemplating a city that was full of monsters and victims and everyone in between. "Beautiful night," the woman said eventually. "Yeah, it is." "You look like you just survived something." Celine laughed. It came out harsh. "That obvious?" "I've got the same look. Divorce finalized 3 hours ago from a man who spent 7 years convincing me I was crazy for thinking he was cheating." The woman shrugged. "Turns out I wasn't crazy. Just married to someone who preferred lying to honesty. I just watched my ex get sentenced to life in prison for systematically manipulating and destroying vulnerable women. Well, that's definitely worse than my divorce." The woman held out her hand. "I'm Jennifer." "Celine." They shook hands like they were making some kind of pact, survivors recognizing each other. "What are you going to do now?" Jennifer asked. "I have no idea. Figure it out as I go, I guess." "That's probably the healthiest approach. I'm thinking about moving. Somewhere small. Somewhere I can work in a garden and not see anyone for days if I don't want to." "That sounds perfect. You should come visit sometime. Once I figure out where I'm going. Maybe I will." They exchanged numbers, knowing they probably wouldn't actually call each other, but needing the connection anyway. Needing to know that other people survived their monsters and kept living. Jennifer left first. Celine stayed at the Overlook until the sky went from blue to purple to black, and the city lights looked like stars that had fallen and forgotten how to get back up. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For not seeing what he was doing until it was almost too late. For not protecting you better. You deserve so much more than what I gave you. I hope you find peace. Victoria." Celine typed back, "Thank you for everything you did do. You saved my life. That counts for something." 3 dots appeared showing Victoria was typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. "If you ever want to talk, if you ever need anything, I'm here." "I know, same to you." She put her phone away and stood at the railing watching water flow dark and steady below, thinking about everything that had happened, every choice that had led here, every moment where she could have walked away but didn't. Maybe she'd been naive. Maybe she'd ignored red flags that should have been obvious. Maybe she'd let loneliness make her stupid, but she'd also fought back. had gathered evidence, had testified, had made sure Lucian faced consequences even when it would have been easier to just disappear with whatever money he offered. That counted for something too. Months passed. Celine moved out of the city to a small town 3 hours away where nobody knew her name or her history. She rented a house with a garden and spent her days learning how to grow vegetables that kept dying because she didn't know what she was doing. She got a job at a local bookstore where the biggest drama was whether to order extra copies of the new bestseller. She went to therapy twice a week, talked about Lucien and manipulation and trust and all the ways trauma embedded itself in your nervous system. Learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days she'd feel fine and other days she'd have panic attacks in the grocery store because someone looked at her wrong. She joined the support group Victoria had mentioned, sat in circles with other survivors and shared stories, and learned that she wasn't uniquely broken, that what had happened to her was part of a pattern, that men like Lucien found women like her because vulnerability looked like opportunity. The thing that helped me the most, one woman said during a meeting, was realizing that being targeted didn't mean there was something wrong with me. It meant there was something wrong with him. I didn't fail at recognizing red flags. He succeeded at hiding them. Celine cried during that meeting, and the next one, and the one after that. Cried until she was empty, and then somehow kept finding more tears. But slowly, in increments so small she almost didn't notice, she started feeling human again. She learned to drink her coffee however she wanted without worrying if someone was judging the sugar-to-cream ratio. She learned to make plans without checking if they were okay with someone else first. She learned that being alone didn't mean being lonely. She started writing. Nothing fancy, just a journal where she documented everything that had happened. Every manipulation, every red flag she'd ignored, every moment where she'd chosen to stay instead of leave. Not because she wanted to publish it, not because she thought her story was special, but because writing it down made it real in a way that just remembering didn't. Made it something she could look at objectively instead of carrying it around as shame. Caroline called every few weeks. They'd talk about recovery and setbacks and the small victories that came from just getting through a day without falling apart. I went on a date, Caroline said 6 months after the trial. First one since Lucien. How was it? Terrible. I spent the whole time analyzing everything he said, looking for signs of manipulation. Went home early and cried for 2 hours. But you tried. That's something.
Yeah, I tried. Caroline was quiet. You thinking about dating again? Not even a little bit. I can barely trust myself right now. Definitely can't trust anyone else. That's valid. We get to heal at our own pace. Victoria sent updates occasionally. She'd testified at Magnus's trial. He got 25 years for the human trafficking charges. She'd moved to Oregon, was working at a nonprofit that helped abuse survivors, was trying to make amends for years of enabling terrible people. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, she wrote in one email, but at least I'm doing something useful now instead of just collecting a paycheck while people suffer. Rebecca's mother reached out once, asked if Celine would be willing to speak at an event about recognizing psychological abuse. Celine said yes, and then immediately regretted it when she saw how many people were in the audience. But she got through it, told her story, answered questions, watched people nod like they understood because they'd been through similar things. Thank you, Rebecca's mother said afterward, for being brave enough to testify, for making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. I'm sorry I couldn't save Rebecca. You couldn't have. She was already too deep by the time you met Lucien, but you saved the women who would have come after you. That matters. A year after the trial, Celine got a letter forwarded from her old address. Prison mail. She recognized Lucien's handwriting on the envelope. She almost threw it away unopened, almost burned it in her fireplace and pretended it had never arrived. Instead, she opened it sitting in her garden with her therapist on speed dial in case reading it broke something fundamental. The letter was short. Celine, I know you'll never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to understand that everything I felt for you was real. I loved you the only way I knew how, the only way I was capable of. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking you to write back. I just wanted you to know that in my own broken way, I meant everything I said to you. I hope you're happy. I hope you found a life that doesn't include people like me. L. She read it 3 times, then burned it in the fireplace and watched his words turn to ash. Because even now, even locked away for life, he was still trying to manipulate her.
still trying to make her believe that control was love, that possession was care, that systematic abuse was just a misguided attempt at connection. She wouldn't give him that. 2 years after the trial, Celine opened a small restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a warm space with mismatched furniture and a menu that changed based on what vegetables came in fresh from local farms. She named it Haven because that's what it was supposed to be. A place where people could exist without performing, without being anything except themselves. It was successful in the way small-town businesses were successful. She made enough to pay bills and occasionally hire help during busy seasons. Made enough to live simply and sleep at night without nightmares. She hired other survivors when she could. Women who'd been through their own versions of hell and needed somewhere safe to work while they figured out who they were after trauma. She didn't ask for details, just provided steady work in a place where nobody judged if you needed to take a break because panic attacks didn't care about lunch rushes. Caroline came to visit on the 2-year anniversary of the verdict. They sat in the restaurant after closing, eating leftover soup and drinking wine that was too cheap to be good but perfect anyway. "You've built something here," Caroline said, looking around at the space Celine had created. "Something that's entirely yours." It took a while to figure out what that even meant, having something that's mine. "Are you happy?" Selena thought about it, really thought. "I'm not unhappy. I'm not terrified. I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder waiting for everything to collapse. That's close enough to happy for now." "That's more than most of us get." Caroline raised her glass. "To surviving, to building lives that belong to us, to never letting anyone make us feel invisible again." They clinked glasses and drank and sat in comfortable silence while the restaurant settled around them. Later, after Caroline went back to her hotel and Selena was cleaning up, she stood in her kitchen and looked at the copper pot she'd bought specifically because it reminded her of the one in Lucian's penthouse, the one where she'd burned porridge and finally said no. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. But it had happened to her. She'd been that person, scared, manipulated, so desperate for connection that she'd ignored every warning sign. She didn't regret her past self, didn't judge the choices that woman had made, because those choices had led here, to this kitchen, this restaurant, this life that belonged to her and no one else. The porridge burned at 11:47 p.m. had been the beginning of her ending, the moment she'd decided she'd rather lose everything than remain invisible. And she had lost everything. Her sense of safety, her ability to trust easily, her belief that people were fundamentally good underneath whatever masks they wore. But she'd gained something too. She'd gained herself, the version of her that knew how to fight, how to survive, how to build something new from the wreckage of everything that had been destroyed. She turned off the lights in Haven and locked up. Walked home through quiet streets in a town where nobody knew her story, where she was just Celine who ran the restaurant, who grew vegetables badly, who was kind but kept her distance. That was enough. Maybe someday she'd trust someone again. Maybe someday she'd risk vulnerability with another person. Maybe someday she'd believe that love could exist without control. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd spend the rest of her life alone in her small house with her dying garden and her successful restaurant and her chosen family of other survivors. Both options were valid. Both options were hers to choose. And that, more than anything, was what freedom actually meant. Not the absence of fear, not the guarantee that she'd never be hurt again, just the simple, profound ability to choose her own path without someone else pulling the strings. She fell asleep that night in a bed that was entirely hers, in a house nobody else had keys to, in a life that finally actually belonged to her. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't dream about glass towers or surveillance cameras or men who loved like predators. She dreamed about gardens, about vegetables that grew, about a restaurant full of laughter and people who chose to be there instead of people who felt trapped. She dreamed about freedom, and when she woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through windows she'd chosen, to birds singing in trees she'd planted, to a day that stretched ahead full of nothing except the choices she decided to make, Celine Vey smiled, because in the end, she'd discovered something neither power nor fear nor elaborate manipulation could ever destroy. She'd discovered that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was living well. It was building something beautiful from the ashes of everything that had tried to break her. It was choosing herself every single day, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, even when being alone felt like giving up, because choosing herself had never been giving up. It had been the only way to actually survive. And survive she did.